working on his technical things out there. We're going to go ahead and welcome everybody to Santa Clara City Council work meeting. Appreciate everybody being here. Appreciate our guests and look forward to hearing them a little bit later, but we're going to go ahead and, council, with your permission, jump into the working agenda and go down to item 2 on the compensation plan discussion. Brock?
All right. So something we wanted to bring to council with changes in the market and pay with our neighboring cities. Spoken with some of the city managers and specifically St. George City, which is one that we do compete with for employees. And so we did a market analysis on compensation back in 2012. It was updated in 2019, which gives a range for each position that the city has. One of the things that we don't have is how an employee moves through that range. There's no real guidance on how that happens. It's just left up to department head, supervisor, city manager to how an employee would move through that range. So one of the things that we've come up with, trying to give us some guidance on how somebody would move through that range. One of the things that we see at times is all of a sudden somebody will be here for an extended period of time and they haven't really moved through that range. They may have been here 12, 15 years and they're still, below the midpoint, or they've been here, 25 years and 27 years and haven't reached to the max of that range. So currently, this is just a sample of our market analysis there, that probably the low end of the range where we try to hire is that minimum of 71% of the max. We go to the midpoints at 86% and then 100%. So and we try to hire towards that, to the minimum, depending on the qualifications, the experience, that may hire it closer to the midpoint. So that's our current. So currently we go from that 71% to 100%. Probably could take 30 years for an employee to move through that, depending on how it happens, because there's no guidance. And we speak to Jack Taylor, who left at 27 years and still was well below his max. So it happens. And so we're trying to get the guidance of how to do that. And one of the things that we're proposing is that within 6 years of when somebody's hired, they would get to their midpoint within 6 years of hire. So giving us some guidance of how somebody would move, that they would move from their higher point to their midpoint within 6 years of hire. So they'd go from 71% to 81%. And on that, after that 6 years, they hit the midpoint. We would also saying that they go from their midpoint to their max within 12 years or within 6 years. So they would be at roughly their max within 12 years of working for the city. And with that, what we do hitting that max, we would ask that actually create a new max pay, raising that to 115%. What some of our neighboring cities are looking at is that 100% is really the market average. That's what they're going to. Like St. George has actually raised theirs to 120%, and they're hiring at the 80% mark and getting to 100% within 5 years of hire. So they're going to that market average 100% within 5 years of hiring an employee, and then they can get it up to 120%. So we're bringing to leave our ranges where they are, but adding that 115% after 12 years, that somebody could still actually move to 115% of that average. So this is just kind of a summary there. We move from the minimum to midpoint in 6 years, and midpoint to the market average at 6, and move the maximum to 115%. Move from the market average to the maximum by year 20. And then after year 20, once they reach that, it would just be a 1% lump sum payment out, no increase to the base pay. It all depends on budget constraints, whether those things can happen, but it'll help keep us competitive with our neighboring cities as wages increase and people become more competitive. So that's what we're proposing, not for any approval tonight, but bring them towards for you to have for a discussion. See how you feel about having that guidance to move our employees through, having kind of a set guidance, and also allowing to move the maximum from that 100% or market average to 115%.
What happens if you have a superstar?
You can move them faster if you did. This is the minimum that we would like to do to move so people don't get, I'll say, lost as they're moving.
And what happens if it goes the other way?
If they're not a superstar,
Yeah, if they're a negative star.
well, if they're a negative star, I would work too with department heads and stuff. If they're not meeting the expectations, then we would move in the direction we had to either help them become a star or find an alternative route, I guess. But we work to help everybody to become a star and give them the training and help they need to be able to perform.
So Brock, how much of a pay raise per year is that to get to that point?
It's about a 2% increase.
And what have we historically done?
We haven't done a COLA, like across the board COLA increase for a long time. Most of it's been, we've given an amount to a department head saying you have X amount to give amongst your staff. So we haven't done one across the board for a long time. And still this would still allow for that to happen for those who are superstars or, exceeding expectations to get more, but people could still move through that range. I know as we did some of them this last year when we did our adjustments in January, when we were looking at them and saw, people who had been with the city, 18, 19 years and weren't even at their midpoint. And those are ones that we don't want to have happen, because those are the easy ones that could turn around and say, well, I can make, 10, 15,000 more going elsewhere. And we want to make sure we stay competitive. And so this will give us that guidance to make sure we're moving people along and don't lose them.
Brock, what is the range as far as the employees the city has? Explain the range part of 1 through 9.
Oh, this is just that range 1 through 9 is just, I grabbed a sample of the market analysis so that would fit to a position. I don't have the positions on here, but it fits to a position with the city. And it says that range is I just put 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 through 9, but it says, say, range 1 could be a public works operator 1, and range 2 might have been a parks operator 1. And that just tells that this is the minimum that they should make, and then to the midpoint of the max. So it's just a positions range that through the market analysis, through the state, what roughly they're making.
And maybe Jared already asked that. I didn't quite hear the question, but as far as what we're bumping up, was that 2%, or where does that fall for us? Where are we lacking today? Percentage wise, where are we down?
Well, if you went from the minimum to the midpoint over 6 years, you're just over 2%. It's right about 2% is what we're asking over 6 years. So that, and then another 2% to go from that midpoint to the market average or max each year is what we're asking roughly to get each employee, I guess, at the minimum.
Yeah, and right now it's just every budget retreat, we kind of decide what we can afford, and city manager kind of pitches to us what would be a good option. This would just more formalize that process and understanding.
Yeah, and like I say, that I know St. George is going there doing theirs. Their minimum is now their midpoint, and they're doing that from that midpoint to that 100% in 5 years. I've heard some other discussion with other cities up north where some are cities now they have much better budgets that can handle it, but they're moving people so fast that municipalities around them couldn't keep. They were training people and then losing them to this municipality because their pay was better and they were moving them so fast through their range that everybody was trying to get to that municipality, and created a lot of, I guess, frustration with neighboring cities because they couldn't keep. They were just a training ground for this other municipality. And I know we've got great staff here right now, and we don't want to become that for any of our neighboring cities. So I believe in staff, as we talked, this would help us stay competitive. So
I do know that St. George City has an incentive program too with that. It's not strictly COLA. The advancement is based on evaluation of department heads for the individual job descriptions that you have within the city. And so I think a combination of incentive plus COLA, but I'm not a believer in just automatically raising a wage because of tenure. I think that it needs to be based on performance at the same time. And so to use a mixture, to have job descriptions for the 1 through 9 and what they're incentivize, what levels they would reach each year, maybe their certification in certain areas. When they reach that certification, there's an advancement. But if they're not achieving and they're not performing, then they don't get the advancement. So I think if we could mix the two, but I agree with you. We're going to lose good people with increased wages going to towns where budget restraints are not anywhere near what we are. And so that may never equal out. And so we've got to make sure that we can perform some way. And if we've got people that are exceptional, to be able to move them along faster than others, to me, is advantageous. And I think we need to come up with, through the department heads, come up with incentives. First year, if you reach here, second year here, that's also part of the raise situation. That's just my opinion.
I do think it's critical we get, so, and I'll just use our company. This is how we operate. I'm just talking commercial plumbing. We have a base rate for a brand new guy starting, and it's X. And when you go through school for 4 years and get your journeyman, you should be here. And then when you've spent that, so you basically have and I think that's really sounds like what we're missing is how that works. Obviously that's changed dramatically in the last little bit, just with wage. I mean, we've seen wage increases, starting guys basically up 25% at starting wages just in the last year. So I do think having I think it's important for the employees to see that and know, okay, when this is where you're going to be, this is everything goes well. So you're right. But you don't want to take out the incentive either of really rewarding those that go above and beyond. Otherwise we're just a bunch of robots out there.
But Brock, doesn't the employee, aren't the way these ranges and the job positions defined, an employee can move not only across, but he can go up or down into the next slot, like public works employee 1 gets a certification and can go to 2. So he's jumping up a line. He's not can only increase by tenure, but he can increase by qualification and by certification and it's already built into the system because he's changing lines, changing ranges.
Yeah,
right?
That's correct. Yeah, they can.
That's what I'm.
Yeah, by their qualification certifications that they do, to me, like a Public Works 1 to Public Works 2 or Parks 1, Parks 2, Firefighter 1, Firefighter 2, those things. Yeah, they can move up the range, which increases as their wage as well.
And my question, common labor, which we cross-train everybody still to perform more than what an individual job description may require. And so therefore there's incentive for them to become better at doing more. And if they do that, then we would give them the opportunity of advancing it. To me, and if they know that they can do that, I think that incentivizes them so that they can achieve greater and they know that they can get better pay. To me, it's critical that we don't just tie it to length of term, but that we tie it to performance too.
And when we do annual evaluations which is what a lot of, I think, the department heads, what they base when they come time to do, when they have their allotment, to how they do it and decide how they divvy that up. So evaluation still will play a factor. So we know when we've got superstars, we got people who are going above and beyond, that we can reward them.
So are they getting moved up in grade presently, or that we're not, that's the problem? We're not moving them in their
Well,
grades to increase their compensation?
We are moving them in their grades when they meet that qualification, when they're ready to move in a grade, we will. But more so, we allow them to move up. We will as they do, but this is more moving them, making sure they're moving horizontal. So we'll move them like as they need to vertically, but horizontal is the one that this really addresses, making them move horizontal, because so we don't end up with those 20-year employees that have been great, and their pay is, well below where a 20-year employee should be.
Yeah, and I guess I would just look at it like, the purpose of a COLA increase is just so that they're making the same money they made the last year compared to their buying power, correct?
Yeah, it's
The cost of living adjustment. So that does hurt. If you have somebody that hasn't gotten that over the years, they could technically be making less money. They've gotten some pay raises over the years. It hasn't been enough to keep up with inflation. So I'm looking at this. This is more like a COLA plan and then we're talking about, we also need to have incentives for people that do a really good job. So I'm definitely in favor of this, of making sure we're keeping up with inflation, and that, someone doesn't get way behind just because the city decided that year to do something different with compensation.
I think, Brock, when you bring it back, it may help if we had some of the job descriptions, some of the sample descriptions, where you could see how somebody starting to work for the parks or starting to work public works or admin can go both ways.
Okay.
Over time, just as an example.
Okay.
Show the council that I think it's happening now. I think the biggest problem we may have is a personal top out in the table. He can't go any higher, doing a great job. And then he's going to start moving, laterally over with his tenure. We don't have a super city manager. Well, we do have a super city manager. We have a city manager. We may have an assistant at some point in time, but we don't have the next one up. Unless you run for mayor, and then it's going to be a huge pay cut. But you see what I'm saying?
Mhm.
I think if you bring some examples, because I think it's the way I understand the departments, that's in place to do it that way. And the ability and the training is available for the individuals to move up through their descriptions. And I think some examples of that would probably demonstrate and answer council's questions.
Okay. All right. We'll do that.
Any other
Is there-
comments, council?
Any, also with that, the big adjustment is allowing to go to 115%. Above that 100%, is there any concern with going?
I don't, if St. George is already going to 100% on
Their 100% is their midpoint
their
now.
minimum, then we probably need to have something more than the
So-
maximum.
So their max was, now they're going to 120%.
Yeah. So I don't, council?
I think part of it too is just seeing as you bring that back, I think it'd be good to see the entire benefit package as a whole. I think it's important as a company that it's not just your dollar per hour. It really what's all included in that benefit package, and to put we put a dollar per hour for health benefits to show what they have for that, for IRA contributions that's matched, for bonuses, things like that. I just think it's good to see as a whole, and it's important to know all that. But yeah, again, we need to be competitive. We need to be, and people need to be able to make a living and get the fruits of their hard work. So I think I'd like to see all of that, and just as we move forward.
Okay. All right. We'll put together and bring it back. Thank you.
I
Thanks,
don't know
Brock.
that we can ever keep up with St. George.
No.
But I think we need to be competitive.
Yeah.
But we I assume we have better working conditions here than we do in St. George.
I like to believe so.
I hope so.
Let that go on the record.
Okay.
Thank you.
Roger, are you ready? Let's go ahead and, this is the Utopia discussion. And we'll go ahead and turn the time over to Roger for introductions, and you got the floor.
All right. Well, thanks. Let's see, that thing's on. I don't know if we have a way to get the display to this computer, if there's a button or switch, so we'll try that out. But appreciate you having us here. My name is Roger Timmerman. I'm the CEO at Utopia Fiber. We have Laurie Harvey here, who's even more important. She's our CFO, and she is a guru in public finance. She's actually from this area, but she's spent many years working in public sector, worked as an assistant city manager for Midvale City for a number of years. Anyways, an expert in public finance. Even today we're tied up in a pricing for a $18 million project for Pleasant Grove this morning that priced, and interest rates are fantastic. It's a great time to finance these types of projects. I'm still not seeing the display. Anything I can do here?
So we can do your flash. I try to do it from here, and you can run your PowerPoint.
Look for something. This is Santa Clara.
If that'll,
Full screen. Oop.
if that'll let you click through. If not,
Yep, I can do that. All right, sorry for the typo here. We did Washington Terrace last night, so Santa Clara Terrace today. Yeah, some of these are a little hard to read, but what Utopia Fiber is, the first thing I think is important to note that we're not a company. We're not a business selling you anything. When you're talking about Utopia, we're an interlocal entity. We are cities. We're owned and managed and controlled by those cities. So it's like a joint powers authority or a local district or something like that. So we're public sector and a partnership of cities. There's the original cities at the top. We've got small cities, we got big cities, we got rural cities. And then we have these new partner cities. Maybe 10 years ago, people would have said, there's no way we want to be part of that. But lately things have been going very, very well. And we have a great model for cities to come in and basically get all the good and none of the bad of what Utopia has to offer. And with that, we've done projects in Woodland Hills. They're much smaller than this city. We are very interested in small cities and rural cities and all over the place. Idaho Falls, Morgan City, West Point, Clearfield, Pleasant Grove, and there's several others that are working with us to be in those boxes. But we're not publicly naming them yet. So anyways, let me talk to you about what we do with these new partnerships and how that might apply. This is kind of where we are. We have this route that goes through the Wasatch Front, but down into Las Vegas. And we have this little offshoot coming into St. George, and we have a franchise agreement there, and we're building middle mile routes in St. George. And a lot of people know us for fiber to the home, but we actually provide services in over 50 cities across Utah with middle mile. We do schools and businesses and city offices, county offices, state offices, all sorts of stuff. But most people know us for fiber to the home, which is 16 cities right now. The history of it, I chose those colors intentionally. So red was not so great. You may have heard of that, where Utopia got started off and started building fiber networks. And those projects were financed and backed by those cities. And they didn't get enough revenues. And so that left a shortfall on those cities that they've had to pay on. But if you think about fiber and internet, it was a little different back in 2004. There was no Netflix, there was no YouTube, there was no Facebook. All the top uses of the internet didn't even exist. And That was stuff that was out, coming out 10 years ago. Now we're talking remote education and remote work and telemedicine, and certainly none of those things were around. Things have changed dramatically. The streaming services and demand skyrocketed in about 2010. The cities say, hey, we really do need this, even though we've had some difficult track record. And they created UIA, and UIA is really phase 2 of Utopia. And if we're talking about a potential city partnership, it's actually a UIA partnership. We talk about Utopia and UIA collectively as Utopia Fiber, but it's actually, they're 2 different legal entities. UIA has done $240 million of fiber projects in various cities, and those are all at no cost to the cities. Like absolutely no shortfall. They completely are paid for by the revenues from people who choose to sign up. There's no mandatory fees, no taxes. It's just people sign up. We get money from those people who sign up, and we use that money to pay for the system, both operating and the debt service on those projects. It's been hugely successful. So that's kind of where we're at now, is we're wrapping up a lot of the other projects and have reached out to see if other cities want to participate in that. Let me just, we're going to take a couple of criticisms just head on here. Some people will say, now, Utopia is this anti-government or anti-competitive overreach of government type of thing, and this should be done by private sector and all this. And it's like, actually the reality of what we do is it is a pro-private sector move. It enables competition, it enables the private sector. So for every incumbent monopoly, they don't like it. We're anti-monopoly. But we've got a whole bunch of Utah-based companies that love it, that want to come and offer services here, right? So what this does is it's us putting in a public fiber infrastructure, and then we don't provide service. We just say, this is now here, and it's a publicly owned asset, and the private companies can come in and use this. And just like we would with an airport or some other public infrastructure, we would charge fees for the use of that. That's how we pay for the system, but it enables a competitive market. And so we use that comparison. We use a comparison of airports, but also roads, right? We build public roads. That's an infrastructure we put in, but we don't build cars. We don't pick and choose which postal carriers can use those roads. So this picture, we show FedEx, UPS, and USPS all competing with each other on public infrastructure. Airports are the same sort of thing, where we build public airports and various airlines come in and compete with each other on that infrastructure. If we didn't do that, you'd end up with a, Southwest Airlines airport, and they would charge higher rates. You'd have very few choices, kind of like what we have in broadband, right? But by putting in a public infrastructure, we now open the floodgates to competitive options in your city. It isn't just about fiber to the home. This also becomes a backbone for your city. So this becomes critical for your city itself to connect your offices, your parks, water facilities. We do smart city applications. Schools and libraries use it, county facilities, state facilities. This is not just about homes. This is about everyone who needs this, and the city itself becomes the anchor to that. And it's not just about streaming video. When we do talk about those end users, we need remote education and remote work and telehealth, and just all sorts of things that we're now using broadband for that just weren't things that we did 10 or 20 years ago. When we build these networks, we destroy these things. These things are all gone. Never again do you get surprise rate hikes. You don't have these weather-caused outages. You don't have early termination fees. You don't have buffering, overage charges, installation fees are gone, evening slowdowns, coverage cherry picking, right? Where just some parts of a city gets fiber and others don't. The digital equity is important to us, that everybody has this, and not just high-end areas or areas that are most profitable to the private providers. There's no speed throttling. All of these things forever are eliminated in your community when you build a public fiber infrastructure. With Smart City, these are just some examples. We work with cities to put in meter infrastructure so you can monitor all your meters continuously instead of driving the truck around once a month. Upgrading SCADA systems, enabling smart irrigation so you don't waste water. You can do weather-based and temperature-based algorithms in control. Traffic control. We put in air quality sensors with our networks. Wi-Fi in public locations, parks, city facilities, smart lighting, manage your facilities better. I mean, we could do a whole work session on all the different smart city things, so I'll skip through those quickly. The way we build this is it's a dedicated architecture. So we do a fiber to every house, and they're not shared. It's not GPON, which is really common out there for fiber networks, where you still, it's basically like building a cable network, except you use fiber. You know how your cable service gets slow during the peak hours? That's what happens on GPON networks, is they're shared. And so we don't do that. Everybody gets your own dedicated connection and capacity. We kind of have to do that because we have to commit to the different providers that compete with each other on our network, that their competitors can never interfere with them and their customers. And so it's a superior architecture. We enable 10 gig to every home and business. We have that available. Most connections are 1 gig, but the whole system is built to 10 gig. And that's the fastest in the country. So even in little old Woodland Hills, Utah, you can get a 10 gig connection at any address. And that applies to any of our cities. This is the way it kind of works from a customer perspective. If you're a home user, you come in here and you say, well, I'll get a connection from Utopia, and there's no installation fee, there's no commitment, but you pay us $30 a month if you want the service, and that pays for the fiber. And then you get to pick from this menu. Again, sorry for the view here, it's hard to see, but there's like 15 different companies with all sorts of different options, from 250 meg, gig, and 10 gig at different price points. And they compete with each other with services. And they have phone services and video services and security and all sorts of cool stuff. But this competitive marketplace makes sure that they provide a good service. And they know that if they charge you too much, you're going to switch. If they don't answer the phone when you call, you're going to switch. And so competition really changes the way broadband providers behave. And you see a dramatic change in the quality. So the right column there is the total. So you say our cost plus the service provider cost roughly adds up to about 250 megabits for $65 a month, plus or minus a few dollars, because there's a little difference. We don't set retail pricing, so the providers kind of charge what they want to charge. 1 gigabit you can get for about $78, 10 gigabit for about $200. And again, nobody's forced to sign up, right? If you want to keep what you have, some people, one of the first things we'll get is, I got some wireless connection for $40 a month. And it's like, okay, great. If it's more important to you to pay $40 a month for wireless connection than to upgrade to a fiber connection for $65, that's fine. We don't need 100% of the people to sign up. I'll get into the economics of what we expect and what we need to get signed up on the system for it to work. But it's a optional service for anyone in the city. People really like it. We do third-party surveys, and this is our Net Promoter Score of 64. It's kind of this question that you probably have answered lots of times before, when you'll get it all the time, where it says, how likely are you to recommend this thing to a friend or colleague? And that's a specific question used to calculate a customer satisfaction score that's referred to as a Net Promoter Score. And we do better than anyone in that. When we look at the results from if they have Comcast or CenturyLink or someone else, they're generally about -60. Ours is +60. There's a dramatic difference. Your service options are actually worse than they are in most of our territory. So in most of our territory, we have Comcast, CenturyLink, and about 3 or 4 wireless providers. You guys have, my understanding is TDS and CenturyLink and a couple wireless providers. Is that accurate? That's kind of what we're seeing. So we actually think we do a lot better here, to be honest. Here's another metric we look at is Google ratings. We're top rated in the state with 4.5 stars on Google compared to other broadband providers. I don't have every single one on here, but these are some of the larger ones. So we're very proud of that. The number 2, number 3, number 4 are all providers on our network. So kind of share in those top rankings. Our subscriber growth is going like crazy. We're close to 40,000 subscribers now, with most of those coming on just in the last couple of years. In the last year, we built more fiber than anyone else, 1.7 million feet of conduit, 1.4 million feet of cable. We connected over 10,000 households, and we're going to shoot well past that this year. Okay, so this is what the structure looks like. We say, okay, city, you want fiber to the home, you want everybody to have this service. This is how it works. On the left, we've got Utopia/UIA. we finance this thing. So again, if I say, hey, you guys should, bond for this thing, you'd probably be throwing me out the door, right? So one of the nice things about this is the Utah Infrastructure Agency as a public entity does this. We finance it, we bond for it, we pay for it. There's no city debt. And then we receive revenues from the system and we pay off that debt and we pay for the costs of the system. And that includes everything. So it's turnkey. We do electronics, maintenance, fiber, utility locating, repairs, everything needed to do this is taken care of by us. On the right, there's the catch, right? We don't just do this anywhere. This is a partnership. And what the cities that make up Utopia have asked is we need the partnering cities to have a little bit of skin in the game. We don't actually need it. We have the ability to fund and finance these projects without it, but you're entering into a partnership. So what those cities do is they say, we're not going to make you pay anything, but we're going to have you guarantee the incremental financing cost of this project. So what that means is I'm going to have some cost to build, not anything I've built previously, hundreds of millions of dollars of previous investments already there, right? You don't have any obligations to that. You don't have any obligations to anything outside of your city. But the incremental cost of what it takes us to build out your city, we're going to finance that. And we're going to need some take rate, some number of customers and revenues to cover that cost. And we do ask that the partner city would guarantee that with a revenue pledge. And then we go get customers and then you don't have to pay anything. So I'll show you examples of where we've done this model and how that's worked and what the risk of that is. But we have several things in there to actually show that we're not actually expecting this to hit the city and to protect you from that. And one of them, the top one's probably just all of our other projects have been successful. Everything we've done since 2010 has been, we're 10 for 10 on all of those projects with actually lots of headroom. We also count any services the city has, like if you were just to switch your services from what you have now to Utopia, and usually it's both switch and upgrade, meaning, hey, I don't want just a better connection, but I want like all my parks and I want all these other facilities. Every dollar of that counts to offset that risk. So even though it costs us money to do it, we're just going to make sure that that money offsets your risk. Any increasing demand over time helps with more revenue. Any new development, whether that's commercial or residential, all of that actually decreases your risk over time because your risk and your obligation is capped. There's several other things that mitigate risk, but let me get to those here. First, I just want to make the point that if I came to you and said, let's say this is I don't know what the number is, it's on another slide. Let's say it's a $7 million project. If you were to pay for $7 million, the whole thing out of pocket and say, hey, we need to come up with some way to pay for this, it would be worth it. And the reason it would be worth it, you compare it to other things that cities pay for, whether it's parks or utility services or rec centers or whatever it may be, this brings a dramatic improvement to the city in the form of you save everyone $27 a month on average in their pockets every month, every household. That's the average impact of bringing in this competitive option. And there's a link to this. We'll share this with you so you can see the results of various studies of cities that have done this before and afters. So there's an enormous economic benefit. This isn't costing residents. This is actually saving residents money. You increase property values. Maybe you don't want that because they've been going up so much anyways, but generally it's considered a positive. So on average, it makes a 3.1% impact to property values if you have fiber. You protect net neutrality things. So things like prioritization and blocking and filtering and overage charges and all these things that net neutrality was meant to protect. Those laws were thrown out, but having a competitive marketplace that we bring in eliminates those anyways. So a competitive market solves the problem. And it's also a digital divide issue. We make sure everyone in the house and in the city can have the service, regardless of whether it's easy to do or more expensive, right? As a city, we're not doing this for profit. We're doing this to make sure we have a critical service to our residents and businesses. And I'd say that no other municipal project makes such a dramatic and immediate change in economic and quality of life than doing a fiber project. So it'd be worth doing it and paying for it. The beauty is it'll pay for itself. So there's no cost, there's no taxes, and there's no subsidies. So it's really beautiful. Okay, so if the city says on its own, so this is not Utopia, we want to do municipal fiber. We're going to build this and we're going to operate it. The economy of scale is tough and the startup is tough. And you just ask the Utopia cities that started this thing up. And generally you're looking at needing to get take rates up in the 50 to 60% take rate area, and the ramp up is more difficult. And there's a lot of risk. And this is colored to kind of represent that risk, of getting that take rate, and the timing of everything is very, very difficult. By partnering with Utopia, what happens is now you only deal with the incremental cost, right? I've already got over 80 employees full-time to run, design, operate these networks. My incremental cost to now do that in your city, we're probably going to hire one technician to be dedicated to this project. And everything else gets done, just it's incremental to what we're already doing. Maybe 1.5. So we'll see. Maybe we get some other cities down here too, which we're talking to. So, but anyways, with this, we reduce the cost, we reduce the timing, and it really makes this work with very little risk to the city. So that pulls that risk bar down to where we need to be. On the right side of that, you see this is the take rate we need. We need about 40% of the city to sign up for services if we're counting only residential homes. It's actually less than that because we get some businesses, the city, other things that pay more than the residential. We put 2 years of capitalized interest in there. So you see that doesn't start when we say, hey, we need this guarantee and this obligation from the city. It doesn't start for 2 years. We put 2 years of capitalized interest into the project, and that gives us time to build and sign up customers. They actually come on much, much faster than this. In every one of our projects, we've been way ahead of this. This is modeled out as a break even. And the way this works is that first 2 years, all of those revenues are banked as a reserve to make sure that you don't have any exposure. And so we actually buy ourselves 3 to 4 years before you ever need to worry about hitting that take rate, which is way more than we need. I mean, and I'll show you how we've done in other cities. So let's get into the specifics of Santa Clara. So this isn't just like, hey, here's this high level thing. We've designed the whole thing. It's down to every single connection to every single home and business in the city. We know every foot, we know every box, every connection. We did all that work. Usually you pay a lot of money to get that done. That's what we do. We work for cities. So we did all this work, and it's designed. We know what it's going to cost. It's going to cost us about $6.7 million. It's not going to cost the city $6.7 million. It's going to cost us $6.7 million. It's going to cover 2,886 locations. This probably doesn't match up exactly with your meters because there's some things we sell to, like, whether it's a wireless tower or I don't know. There's a lot of different things we sell to, but we can work with the city to make sure we've got everything honed in. And sometimes there's development that we don't catch on county parcel maps and things like that. So we may need to do some fine tuning. But the current design we have has us covering everything in the city. And when we take that $6.7 million and we finance and we build the project and we put in all the costs and the capitalized interest and all that other stuff, it comes out to about $34,000 a month, which sounds like a lot of money. You divide that by $30 a month, which is what we charge, and that's 1,167 subscriptions. We need 1,167 people to sign up for this. And that becomes the crux of the thing. Do we believe that 1,167 households would sign up for this, or some mix? And so that's where I start out here and say 40.4% residential. If it was just residential customers, it would need to be 40.4%. If with some assumptions, pretty conservative assumptions about the city's own needs and some businesses and the schools in the city. In fact, we were actually the #1 award this last year from the Utah Education and Telehealth Network for schools across the entire state. So we do really, really well with schools. So yeah, we'll save the city money and we'll save your residents, but we're saving our schools money, we're saving the state and county money. And there's a lot of benefit, not to just you, but those are revenues we get to count, and that offsets your risk. So we would probably be in really good shape just with about 38% of their homes signing up because we'd get some of those other types of connections to make up the difference. We expect to be 45 to 50% easily, but that's how you break out what that risk actually represents. And it's not like if we're short 10 customers, you have to pay $34,000 a month or something. It's, oh, for short 10 customers, that's $300, right? 30 times 10. It's done in the form of a loan. So if in the very unlikely situation we did have a shortfall that fell back on the city, we pay that back as soon as we get enough customers. And absolute worst case scenario would be at the end of the term, but we've never even had to go anywhere close to considering that. We do really well with these. Sorry, just the form of that guarantee. You say, how are we doing this? You know, it's like, so we're not imposing a tax. We're not, there's no actual dollar exposure, but we do need to identify the form of the guarantee for that. And that's usually in the form of a revenue pledge on something that you don't use. I mean, you use the money, but you don't use it usually for bonding capacity or other things. And so usually what we've seen cities doing is using their power franchise revenues, so gas and electrical franchise revenues, as just, here's a source of revenue that we'll use as the guarantee. But if it was ever called upon, you wouldn't actually use that money. You just use whatever funds you wanted to use in a loan. So this is what it actually looks like for you guys. So this one, sorry, again, the numbers are hard to read on here, but that threshold at the top of that chart comes in, excuse me, comes in about $34,000 a month, and we need customers. This is modeled at a break-even scenario. Every one of our projects has had that green line grow, which represents our revenues, and actually exceeds that number at the 2-year mark way before 2 years. And there was no shortfall. And even if we did have a shortfall for 2 years, we'd still be okay under this type of a curve. So what we're saying is the threshold of breaking even and basically having no exposure is way more conservative than any project we've ever done. And we would exceed it, right? And so let me show you how we've done in other projects. These are our take rates in other cities. Some of them are under construction. And so they're asterisked if they're still under construction or just brand new, because we haven't had the 2 years yet. But all of these take rates are above where you need to be on the blended scenario, right? The 38% scenario. I think the lowest one was like Tremont, and it was, oh, actually, no, Tremont's up at 42%. Layton, I guess, would be an exception because that's at 37%. But we actually did get more than enough revenue from businesses that from a revenue perspective, we're way ahead of where we need to be. Even though the number looks low. So this is the actual on Layton. So the light lines represents that break-even model, and the dark lines represents the actual. So the debt service came in, it staggers a little bit in the early years there, but the revenues went, the timing of revenues coming in comes in and kind of wonky, but overall it stayed way ahead of where it needed to be. And we stopped charting this, but really we got to where we needed to be about a year early. Payson was a $3.5 million project. Another one where I think it was a little less than a year, but still well early. Again, it could have gone about 2 years late and we still would have been okay because of that reserve. But again, we killed it way before we needed to. Morgan, I stopped charting that one a long time ago because it was ridiculous. I think you'd actually mirror Morgan more closely than any of our other cities. Because they didn't have Comcast. They had, other options in the city. They had CenturyLink and other cable provider. So if we're talking about competitive landscape, you look a lot like Morgan. West Point, I needed to update this one, but we actually have exceeded that about 6 months early before the obligation began. And again, we could have gone way past that, but didn't. This is the aggregate of all of them. So those are just the recent ones on an individual basis. This is the aggregate of all UIA projects, representing over $240 million of these projects. Our revenues are way past where our expenses are from a debt perspective and operating. So specifically, it's $248 million, adding 18 million after this morning's thing. So a couple things we look at on this. We look at Santa Clara, and it's like, well, there's some good things, there's some bad things. We say, well, you need to have some businesses here we can get. So that's good. Some of these cities have absolutely no businesses. Woodland Hills had none. They have no schools. But yeah, we still did really well. You guys have a decent number of schools and businesses and other things that help a lot. Similar cities to you, it trends well. Like I said, you look from a competitive landscape, you look a lot more like Morgan, and it's 60% take rate. I mean, it's really, we think we would do that well here. You have especially bad options. You know, it sounds mean to say that, but you know, for the prospects of this, it's actually a good thing because it'll be easier to get customers here. The cons against this, you know, we do have some costs. We don't have fiber in the city today, but we're not far. You know, we are building, you know, we are in the Tonnequin data center, and we've been building middle mile routes in both directions out of there. That's in St. George. And so we are probably already halfway here from there, and also building the other direction in various areas of St. George. And so it's not bad. And in fact, that's new. If we were talking about this 2 years ago, I would have said it's going to be difficult to get here. But because we already have the franchise agreement in place with St. George, we already have some middle mile routes being built. It's actually, the incremental cost to get here is pretty low, but it's not zero. You have moderate soil conditions. So, you know, compared to some of these bench areas in Layton and Orem where it's solid granite, it's a little easier to dig here and drill compared to some of those areas, but it's not the least. I mean, it's, you know, there's some rock that we deal with here and have made some assumptions on that. I have moderate density. You know, it's a little easier if the homes are really, really small and close together. You're moderate. I mean, you're not rural, but you're not urban. So it's good. It's, you know, I have it as a con. It's just kind of more like an average. So from an overall perspective, we look at this and say, this is actually, if we were picking projects, from our perspective, this looks great. It's a low risk project. And some cities say, hey, we're a high risk. Woodland Hills was a high risk. We still did really, really well there. But you know, some cities will say, it's okay, we'll take on more risk and make it work. In this scenario, we say this looks really good from our perspective. It should look really good from your perspective because the economics come out really well. The competitive landscape looks really good. And I think demand is really good. So back to some details on that catch, right? The guarantee. So you say, if this looks so wonderful, why do we need this thing, right? Why don't you just come in here and do it? And again, I just got to remind you who we are. You know, if we were a private business, you know, maybe we would, but we are not. We're a public entity, and we do have the advantage of the ability to do long-term debt financing, right? Infrastructure works really well with that. Private companies usually need like a 5-year ROI. This does not work well on a 5-year ROI. So it's a great fit, and the cities basically say, we need you to be our partner. Right? This isn't a quick turnaround. It's going really well, and we're happy to have other cities participate, but we need you to come to the table and take some, you know, from their perspective, it's more than fair, this structure to you. The next thing here, proof of political support. So they don't want to get into some fight politically. You know, there's some cities that we talked to, and they said, you know, the demand is through the roof. This would work really well. But if city council doesn't agree on this, you know, we're not pushing this on anybody. You know, if the city wants to do this, you know, they'd like to see unanimous support, and only under unanimous support will they counter approve a partnership. We use the guarantee to secure more favorable financing terms. So that kind of goes into Laurie's magic on these things, is we do use that guarantee, and that helps with the bond rating. That, you know, again, it's not a city bond, it's UIA bonds and debt, but it does help to have those types of guarantees in place. The term is 25 years. It starts after 2 years. So there's that capitalized interest period. Those initial revenues buffer against the risk. Business revenues buffer against it. City revenues buffer against it. If there is that unlikely situation of a shortfall, it gets paid back. It's not our money. You know, it's your own kind of project, but we manage it for you. And if there's money to pay you back, then we pay you back. But we don't think that's ever going to be needed. And it hasn't been needed to be needed in any of our others. We take on a lot of obligations though. So this should really be seen as a joint risk situation. So as we go in here and we say, you're on the hook for this amount of money, we are fully anticipating making investment in the city above and beyond that for the long term. So we've already made hundreds of millions of dollars in investment in backbone and networks all over the place and facilities and all that other stuff. So we've taken on that risk. The city gets all that benefit with no risk or exposure. You're taking on this incremental step to get the thing built out in your city, but we're going to have more customers. We're not going to have the 40%. We're probably going to have 60%. And that's not in this financing or in this guarantee. We will pay for those. And we will pay for any new growth, any new homes, any new businesses. We will replace and maintain this thing. We'll pay for all of that stuff. So you have this one-time thing, but this is other cities and the cooperative of UIA taking on risk and obligations into this project. But yet we look at it and say, this is a good place to do that. And that's why we exist. We build public fiber networks. And then, with that take rate over time, that last point there, any new development that comes into the city decreases your risk. And that's because that becomes new potential revenue, but your risk is capped. It never goes up. So we take on the obligation of building to those and adding those customers, but your effective risk, you say if it's 40% today and you add, a few hundred homes, that percent would tick down as you do that. So it's decreasing risk over time. This is okay, so now what? You've thrown this all at us, what do we do with that? There's a couple things you could do. Sometimes we'll do a survey, that's optional. I'll tell you the real world experience we have in similar cities and competitive landscapes and doing this in lots of other places is probably more accurate data than you'll ever get from a survey. But surveys are useful to gauging political support. And we do like to ask residents, you want the city to do this? Would you support your council in making a vote for this thing? Would you sign up? But, I think the real world environment of what we've done in other cities is actually more accurate when it comes to signups, because sometimes people who are supportive are more likely to answer a survey than those who aren't. So that real world experience is very important. But at the same time, when you get into the political support questions, those are more accurate and are very useful to councils, right? If you're on the fence, you're like, well, I don't, what's your constituency going to do? Are they going to be mad at you? Are they going to support this? And you'll hear from people. I mean, I'll pretend that there won't be some people that just say, this is the wrong role of government, or we shouldn't do this, and that, and there's a risk, right? There's 25-year risk. What about this and that and whatever? And so it's good to get that feedback. And so we are happy to do a survey in your behalf. We have actually done a survey in the city. I don't know if you guys remember that. If you wanted us to refresh that survey, we could, but that survey showed really strong support, and it's only gotten higher as more people have done remote work and remote education and all that other stuff. But the level of support back then was through the roof. But that's an option you have. An RFP is another option. So an RFP is useful. It's not required. Some people think this sort of thing would require an RFP, but we are a public entity, and so we do all of our purchasing and contracting through RFP, process. And so the city isn't required legally to do an RFP with us. That's to your discretion to decide to partner with other public entities or not. But if you wanted to just bring other providers to the table, just to say, hey, I just want to make sure no one else out there is willing to solve this problem for us. What's happened is in some of these other cities we've had, as soon as people hear you're talking to us, you're going to hear it. You're going to hear it from the incumbents, right? You're going to come in here and be like, well, we were going to build fiber and we'll do this and you'll get all sorts of garbage promises. We've been hearing it for over 20 years. And you probably have too. They're going to come and they're going to upgrade and they're going to do it, and they never do. And even after you make a decision, they still come in. And actually, the most likely way to get incumbents to do anything is to actually build a fiber network. To be honest, historically, it's proven. But an RFP is a nice way to vet companies, right? Say, well, you say you'll do this sort of thing. What's your history? What's your track record? What are your capacities to do this? And we do really well because we can say, hey, we're the only ones building citywide fiber networks in the state. No one else does it. The only other one out there is Spanish Fork, and that was a city municipal fiber project, but it wasn't Utopia. But there aren't any other carriers that provide citywide fiber. It doesn't exist in Utah except through Utopia. So track record, we certainly win. The history of financing and building and doing it in a way that's pro-competition. And certainly that's a great model because it's not the city coming in and competing, right? It's the city coming in and enabling a competitive environment. So anyways, we kind of actually like RFPs, even though I hate writing them, or the proposals. But anyways, so that's an option you have. If you said, okay, this all sounds great, and we got this draft agreement that captures all these terms and everything looks good, city council approval on an agreement. There's no financing, there's no debt, there's no public hearing required. It's just a contractual agreement with Utopia, or UIA actually. We issue the debt, so we do public hearings, we do all that stuff, make it happen. But you approve a contract and it's off to the races. We take care of the project for you, we build it. You'd have the citywide, the service available citywide. Contractually, we'd have 2 years to be done. We expect that we'd be done closer to about 1.5 to 1.25 years is kind of when we believe we could get this done based on the pace we've done in our other projects. So like West Point was bigger. It was about 3,500 homes. We built that in about 15 months, with most of it done in about 11 months. So anyways, that's kind of our time frame. And then we market and sell it. I take care of it from there. That's about it. Oh, then the other thing is just, comparing us to other options. It's like, we're really the only ones that are doing this. We don't have to ramp up. We already have capacity to build it. We're shovel ready. We have this established service provider marketplace of options. We have a track record. This doesn't involve any city debt. I've got existing fiber backbone in city, so I just asterisk that one. Near the city is probably more accurate. But having that available is a big deal. We have the UETN, UDOT, state and county contracts in place that bring lots of opportunity to revenue to the city already in place with those contracts. The citywide coverage guarantee is a big deal. You're not actually legally allowed to require that of anyone else, of private providers. The federal law doesn't allow it, but they never do it anyways. Even if they say verbally they'll do it. So we commit to that as your partner, and as your, we voluntarily can agree to that. And it's publicly owned, so this will be a forever asset to the community. We consider all of our networks owned by those communities. Ultimately, we treat them that way. You can call me, city managers I deal with all the time, right? That's who my boss is. I report to city managers. So even though we represent a whole bunch of cities all over the state, city manager says, hey, we need this thing. That's who we respond to, and obviously councils and mayors. This is your system, even though it's done under the UIA umbrella. And we've got a good track record. So anyways, that's the last slide on that. So questions, what do you think? Concerns? You want to do it? Want to do a survey, RFP?
The slide, and the city owns the infrastructure.
So it's treated like it is. Okay, so technically it is under the umbrella of UIA, which would be like you being a member of some other public, whether it was like a district or something else like that. So as an entity, we are owned by the public, but the governing structure is a board made of city managers, and it's actually made up of, we've got some elected officials, city council members and mayors on our boards. But we basically say, even though it's not technically owned by the city, you get to use it like it's owned by the city. So what do you want? It's yours. And we build networks for you. So here's your own dedicated private network to all your facilities. And we take care of everything for you.
And you maintain the system.
Yep.
All the maintenance costs.
That's all the downsides if you actually owned it yourself, of like having to repair it and get insurance for it and do utility locating and all that. We do all that stuff.
You provide for capital replacement and all the new investment that goes into it.
Yep, everything, the fiber lifespan is longer than the term of this. The electronics is much shorter. So we replace and refresh electronics over time. We have different life cycles for every piece. So some things are 5 years, some things are 7 years, some things are 10 year. And if anything breaks before then, we replace it anyways. But the budget and model for this all covers that over time.
Does the $30 a month cost increase as a result of the ongoing
I
O&M?
mean, if you did this 5 years from now, it might be more, but that's tied directly to the financing. So that doesn't go up. the service cost, the other side
Mhm.
probably is going to go up, with the rate of inflation and with the tiers increasing though. So for example, going back a few years, you'd say the 100 meg service was what now is a 250 meg service from a price perspective. So, 5 years from now, you're probably getting 10 gig services for the price of gig. So you'll get better and better services in the future for lower cost, but they'll probably fall in line with the general current pricing structures.
Can I ask a
Council?
question?
Mhm.
So if the city's it follows up with what the mayor is saying, if the city's on the hook for the shortfall, then opposite to that, if the subscribership increases substantially, does the bond repayment get done quicker? And then does that $30, once the bond's repaid, does the $30 continue indefinitely? What happens to that?
So it's all collective. So keep in mind, UIA is lots and lots of different projects. So upside is basically, what do we do with this, right? We take on some downside because getting another, say we get another 20% take rate, we're now financing a whole bunch of installations outside of what you've guaranteed. And we need to get that money back to pay off that other financing to do that. But now we have revenues more than we expected. So we use the upside to kind of reinvest back into this and prevent having to go back to you or any other cities for future guarantees and backstops to debt. If we're able to cover all of that and then still have an upside, then that does put us into a position to lower the cost of services or pay off some of these bonds early. But the triggers of when that happens and why, we leave to the discretion of the board so that we can always do what's right. And, because what if there was a competitive threat? Something came in and said, hey, it's $10 less. We could lower our cost of service, right, to stay competitive. If we don't have that, then we probably will be in a position to pay off these bonds early. But we don't make contractual obligations to the city to do that. Just know that, it's not like we're a bunch of private companies or a private company taking profits away. The profits stay with the cities. So we can't give you the money. Actually, state code doesn't allow us to give cities the money, but we can lower the cost of service and pay off debts. So
If you have another city have a bad experience or not have a high take rate, are other cities at risk?
So, the exposure is tied directly to your guarantee, right? So let's say Ivans came in and said, hey, we want to do this, and we didn't get the take rate and there was a shortfall. They would have to pay up to that amount so that there was no exposure to you or any other cities, right? That's the way that is. So you're isolated from risk of all of the other projects. And historically, even the ones that did lose money in the first 10 years, more than 10 years ago, everything since the last 10 years has been great. So yeah, there's no situation where we could possibly come back to you and say, you're doing okay, but because of that one over there, you now have a negative impact. So everybody is taking on the incremental risk. And then you say, well, now what happens to the upside? The upside gets applied to what's in the best interests of the cities collectively, because we're also agreeing, like if we're in a position to lower the cost of services, we're not going to go and say, hey, because I have Linden, for example, is our highest take rate city, they don't get a discount on the price of service. The prices across the board the same. And as we get lots and lots of business revenue and upside, actually our biggest sources of upside are not even in our fiber to the home projects. So we have some businesses and some of these school partnerships, things like that. The likelihood is that we come in at a position to be able to subsidize our fiber to the home projects from things that are completely outside of your guarantee or within your city. But again, that's stuff that's kind of like wrapped up collectively where we say, what can we do? And we need to be able to keep that flexibility so we never jeopardize the organization and we can always make the best decision. So, we get asked that all the time. Like, okay, well, we got all these outstanding bonds. Which one do we pay off earliest? Probably the one with the highest interest rate, right? Not necessarily the one with the timing, right? It's going to be whatever we can do to be in the best interests of all of the cities.
The board, well, go ahead.
I was going to say, but on any given day, Brock could call you and say, what is the subscriber numbers for Santa Clara? And you could give him that number so that
Yep.
he would know if we're in line for a shortfall or something. I mean, you're
Yeah, I mean,
tracking them
we-
independently,
I
correct?
just, last month, I just went and did a presentation with West Point, right? And it was like, guess what, city, we did it, right? We're 6 months early before the obligation even started and we hit your number. Don't sweat it anymore, right? We weren't really sweating it before, but it's nice to know, right? So you get access to all of our reports and stats and revenues and all that stuff. We regularly send out reports to our cities, so.
Question. So as far as the billing is concerned, the city handles the billing for the customer, or do
Nope.
you handle it?
We do it.
And if there's a service that needs to be cut off, that's all handled by you. And through a report, we would know what has happened and where we are in the shortfall. Is that correct?
That's right.
Will all areas of the city be covered? For example, the South Hills is a new area of ours. You cross a river to get to it. Do you have any problems with those type of things?
Well, I can't say we never have problems getting to some areas, but the commitment is that we would get to it. So we work closely with you to be like, okay, that one may be coming in 6 months later. We cross rivers all the time. It's not always easy. It's not the crossing that's difficult, it's the permitting, right? So we do those all the time. If there's a UDOT road that crosses it, is there? Maybe not.
I don't think permitting will be a problem for
Okay, well,
what I understand.
yeah, it depends who owns the river and who has the rights over that, so.
The board, the trustees or whoever they are, does the city get a seat on that when we're in the system?
So we have two categories. So back to that first slide, we have the original founding member cities and we have partner cities. And so basically the way it's handled is because the original cities had a far greater financial commitment and even shortfalls in the early years. They have kind of these member positions, and then we have these partner positions, which are the new partnerships. So the structure is basically designed so that you get to talk about your stuff and you get influence, but when it comes to voting on issues that affect the collective and the history of the organization, then that's only the original founding member city votes. So at that point, we get this question all the time. It's like, well, wait a second, I don't get the same representation. It's like, yeah, but you didn't also pay anything. Some of these cities paid a lot into it. And we say, well, if you wanted to pay into it as if you were one of those original cities from 2004, they would happily have you come in and pay your fair share to do that, but you'd be crazy to do it. So then it's like, are you going to be in a position where you aren't getting any representation, that your voice isn't being heard? And at that point, it's kind of like, what is the relationship you have, with other cities? And usually what we'll do in a lot of cases is go make some introductions and be like, hey, let's have you talk to Alex Jensen and Wayne Pyle and some of these other city managers that are even the chair of the boards, any other board members. And please start attending the meetings. We do them remote, so city managers of new partner cities can attend. There's every single meeting, there's opportunity for discussion and opinion and sharing. So it is very, very open to the desires of the partner cities. But from a legal perspective, when it comes down to a vote, it is usually just the original voting members that get an official vote.
Brock, could you bring up the slide that has the list of the founding and partner cities?
I can answer that first.
Okay.
All right, lots of slides. There.
Thanks.
So those founding members they're the voting members, and the partner cities. I encourage you to ask those other cities, like, hey, West Point, how do you feel? Like, are you heard? Are your concerns being met? And Woodland Hills and Morgan City, Idaho Falls doesn't attend. They're kind of a special case partnership. But they would all vouch for the organization. Like I love using these partner cities as references because they're all like, yeah, it's been fantastic. We love them. They're responsive. They treat us, like the other cities. It's just that when it comes from a legal perspective, I don't have any way to unwind the original structure of the organization.
Can we get a copy of this this
Absolutely.
presentation? You'll get that to us.
If I'm completely illiterate to this process, how are you going to sell me? If
Well-
I were going to my citizens, how am I going to convince them to sign up with Utopia? And what advantage is that to us?
Yeah, so when we start the project or we do this project, we say the city should feel like it's your responsibility to go get those people to sign up. At the same time, we feel like it's our responsibility to go get those people to sign up. So if you're working on it and we're working on it, we're going to go get those customers on. And the messaging around that, it's a couple of things. A lot of people are moving in, signing up for utilities. Hey, you need to know that we have the best broadband in the country, and there's this Utopia Fiber. You should sign up, and then you can pick from customers. So the new move-ins and the city offices and facilities are one of our best points of communication with people to get signed up. Also through newsletters and all this other stuff explaining, hey, this is a great service. It's phenomenally fast. There's no hidden fees. There's all this other stuff, great competitive options. And then from us, you're going to see flyers hitting people. You're going to see a lot of online digital ads, and it's all kind of focused around this is the very best option from a speed, price, and support perspective. And you get $65, you can sign up, and there are all sorts of formats. Now, in addition to that, your efforts and our efforts, these service providers are all fighting each other over these customers as well. So you're going to have X-Mission and Veracity, potentially InfoWest, who's one of the providers on the system. They're more wireless down here. So I don't know, they're probably, I can't speak for them. They may be lukewarm on this. I don't know. Because it's good and bad, right? I mean, they get more customers on fiber, but they have wireless customers in the city today that they may lose to the system. So
how do you convince me that, say, I have TDS or
yeah, what do
someone
you
else?
have today?
Pardon?
What do you have today?
Yeah, TDS.
Do you like it?
Yes.
Okay, what do you pay for it? With all your fees and
With all the fees, about $125.
Okay.
But that includes the TV service and stuff. So
Okay, so
how are you going
so
to?
get YouTube TV for was it $55, $60 a month for an amazing video product, plus a $65 250 meg dedicated fiber connection. You now have a huge upgrade in your broadband and probably a much better video service with that bundle. And there's no term, there's no installation fee, and you'll love it. And your neighbors, when you ask them on Facebook, they're all going to tell you that's awesome. I joke about that, but actually that's one of the biggest sources of people learning about Utopias. They ask their neighbors, like, what do you guys think of this thing? And they're like, I hate what I have. It's unreliable and they charge me too much. And it's like, why are you not on Utopia yet? Because it's not super inexpensive, right? I mean, it's not $30 a month. It's not $40, $65 a month. That's a huge premium over as far as the quality of the service above anything that's available in the city today. It's reliable. You have competitive options. The customer service is phenomenal. So those are the points. I mean, it really depends on the person, right? Some people, their pain point is what they pay. Some people, it's the reliability. Some people, it's the upload speed, right? Our upload speeds are all the same as the download speed. So 250 meg is a 250 meg download and a 250 meg upload. So, commonly with cable companies, you're like, yeah, it's really fast on paper, except during peak hours, but the upload is terrible. And so even though you're sold a pretty high-speed connection on paper, you put 3 or 4 students trying to do school on there at the same time, it doesn't work because they're uploading, right? Their Zoom and those types of applications need a decent upload. And so those things and frustrations that people have drive people to our service. And, we want to be better, but the other guys aren't doing themselves any favors either, and they're driving their customers away.
But in signing the agreement, you don't have a strict franchise. Is that right? Or can we, as a resident in Santa Clara, I can go with whomever I want?
Yeah, you're not required to go with Utopia. No one is.
Yeah.
So to clarify, you're the billing agent, so you send out the monthly bill. I have my service with
So it's
InfoWest.
2 bills. So you get a
Okay.
$30 a month bill from us for the fiber, and then whichever company you pick for services will bill you $35 or
Independently.
whatever you sign up for.
Okay.
So it's one of the, some people complain about that. We find it actually helps a lot, because what happens is if you do, for some reason, have a bad experience, people understand very clear that they get fiber from us and service from this company, and that rather than cancel and go back to TDS or whatever it may be, you know, they'll just switch provider and say, oh, great, I solved my problem. I stick with the fiber network. So it's a little bit of a hassle. And we have online billing and automatic billing, so it's not too bad. But yeah, it is 2 bills, which is a little bit more work for people.
But you have a contract or something with the open market provider that's facilitating the actual service then, like in this.
Yeah.
case,
I mean,
InfoWest.
you go to our website and you go in there in your shopping cart, right? So
Right.
you can sign up for it all in one place.
Right.
You know, it's add $30 a month for my Utopia Fiber, and then I want this provider, and you pick it and it adds it in there. So you buy it, and it's easy to get signed up and going with it.
I'm glad you brought the CFO with you too, because the
I need to have
real
talk
question
more.
is, are you guys still going to be here in 30 years?
What's the why don't you tell them about the financial position of UIA? I don't know. Yeah.
I'd be happy to tell. Yeah, that's a good question, Roger. And the financial position of UIA is we just finished a bond with Pleasant Grove City. That's the most recent city, and we currently have substantial cash revenues. This is the first year we ran a fund deficit, and it was related to our depreciation. So cash-wise, we have a positive fund balance. We have currently 700 new customers coming on per month. I can tell you that jumped up to almost 1,000 right after COVID hit. So we were adding about 500 customers a month. That jumped up to 1,000. It's kind of settled in at 700 or 800. Any other questions you have about the financial status of UIA? It's much better than the financial status of Utopia, but that doesn't affect Santa Clara in the least.
Questions, council?
On the financials, prior to entering an agreement, we could review financials, see where everything stands.
They're online. I looked
Okay.
at them earlier.
Yeah, another thing that I want to mention is, Roger said this, that bonding, if we do a partner city, the rating is based on the city's credit rating. UIA, without a city partner, has a bond rating of a BBB minus. It's investment grade, but it's based on the service revenue, and we have a hard time finding rating agencies that can rate us. They don't have the criteria in place. We're kind of new. But if we have a city partner, they look right through the service revenues to the creditworthiness of the city. So with Pleasant Grove, the bond we just completed, they had a credit rating of A, and the interest rate, the true interest cost, I believe, was 2.62%. That's when that sold this morning.
Now's a really good time to finance these. I mean, if we were to do this a few years ago and interest rates were higher, if your risk would have been higher. Because the cost of money is so good right now, it lowers the risk.
So I have a question on timing with that. So we hear about President Biden's infrastructure plans. We've heard that Governor in his budget had money for broadband as well. Say we pull the plug on this and we go, are we giving up potential subsidies in the process?
So this has been something we've watched really closely. So far, the state programs have all been aimed at rural areas that are a lot more rural than Santa Clara. So, you know, we would love to use that money for this sort of project, but it looks like it's not going to be eligible. Then when there was the CARES Act money, that didn't have any strings attached. So we saw a lot of cities using that money to either kickstart a project or subsidize it to even further lower the cost. If you had some money and you wanted to take you from 40% down, you know, I'd say you could do that. I think it's a bad use of the money because I think 40% works easily. So use the money somewhere else because we don't need it for this project. But then you say, well, what about these future things? You know, maybe we would want to just use it if it's free money or, you know, coming from an infrastructure bill. Unfortunately, they make really good plans that we get excited about, and then they attach strings to it. So again, this latest one, the American Rescue Plan, and what was originally going to be $100 billion for broadband decreased down to about 65 billion, which is still huge. They went in there and the lobbyists for the incumbent phone and cable companies always get involved. And they went there and said, any area that currently has providers that claim 25 meg service are not eligible. And it just, well, that's great because you just made the entire state of Utah ineligible. So it doesn't matter how much money is available. If we don't have a place that's eligible, we can't spend that money and benefit from it. So every good program seems to get killed because our federal government is worthless when it comes to supporting these types of programs. That's my personal opinion, but that's what's happened repeatedly with every program.
And I have a question about redundancy. So you hear about like a fiber line gets cut somewhere and then a whole city's out or something. What would that look like for the city where we are kind of the first in southern Utah? Is there only one line coming in? Is there a redundant line somewhere? How does that work?
So we're fully redundant in and out of Toniquet Data Center. From there to the city, we have planned with this a single route. We could work with you on like, hey, what does a secondary route look like from here to there? There's the long term is to actually have not just redundancy in and out of the data center, because the data center then becomes a single point of failure, but to have an I-15 route, which is currently being completed in sections by UDOT and various partners on that. We also have a tertiary connection from CenturyLink into St. George, and so we have that isn't dependent on the Toniquet Data Center routes that we're using. So there's a lot of things kind of in the long term, and in a 2-year process, it's very likely that those are going to be resolved with some of these other projects. But if they're not, we would kind of just work with you on like, okay, how do we do this? And maybe we could work it into some of these projects. But there's not a clear path of like, do we want to build a separate route to the data center? Or do we want to build a separate route to I-15? Or do we, because there's a lot of different projects working in parallel right now. So the long-term intent would be to be fully redundant all the way in and out of the city. But the initial phase would be a single path.
Okay.
Now our facilities, we do interconnect them. We have redundant air conditioners, we have battery backups, we have generators, standby generators, and that's actually a tier much better than any of the current providers, where most of them will go down after about 4 or 5 hours of power outage because they're battery backups. So our facilities are larger and they're hardened and they're on generators, so they can run indefinitely if there's, wind problems or fire or something like that. If you have too many natural disasters, eventually you could get us. But it's generally a tier much more reliable and hardened than any other provider. I mean, we're building this as city infrastructure. We see this as a critical service, not as how do we build this the cheapest and easiest way to make a buck? And so it's reflected in our design.
So in another city similar to us, can you share like what the aftermath is for those other companies that don't jump on the network to decide to stick with their current infrastructure? Are people losing jobs, or companies going out of business, or do they adjust? And how does that?
I mean, to be honest,
the
main ones that lose, the losers in all of this are the really, really big ones, like the CenturyLinks and the Comcast, and we're a drop at the bucket. I mean, CenturyLink's being eaten alive by Comcast across the country. So you say, yeah, CenturyLink has been losing money and losing customers in the millions, right? We have 40,000 customers. We're not their biggest problem. So it hasn't really affected them significantly. Comcast, we've taken enormous numbers of customers from them. They're having some of their most profitable years they've ever had. So we're just not big enough to really impact them. TDS, even though they may seem like a small company, they're a big company. They're in states all over this place. And so they'll certainly not be happy about it at a local level. But overall, it's a drop in the bucket. So it's not going to significantly impact them.
Any other questions, council? I do have one resident who took the time to fill out a speaker card. Tiffany, do you want to If you had a question you'd like to ask or comment, you need to come up, need to get you on the record. Need your name and address if you would.
Okay. Tiffany Whitehead, my address is 2167 Jacob Drive in Santa Clara. And I came here I understood that there's a possibility of us getting fiber, and I am crossing my fingers that that happens. And I'd like to just briefly, if you'll bear with me, I just wrote down a few comments here so that I can stay on topic. So my husband David and I moved here in the summer of 1999. And David served, some of you know that David served one term on the city council here in Santa Clara. We have always been interested in the success of this community and our citizens, and that is ongoing. So for the last 21 years, we have been internet dependent because we have been self-employed and primarily rely on the internet for education and also for work. And our livelihood is actually critically dependent on the internet to earn our living. So due to poor service and problems with the connectivity, we have burned through, at this last count, we've burned through 3 internet providers over the last 21 years. We're on the 4th one right now. And it's going better than the previous 3. But what we rely on and what we really need is reliable upload and download speeds, and that keep up with all of the applications that we use. I have just recently retired from a career in software and technology. And so I have probably at one point or another, literally a dozen applications that I rely on that are all virtual and internet dependent. And when we have traveled to other cities and in other countries, we found that fiber optic networks provide the speed and the reliability that the world needs and allow all individuals to earn a living. So I'm here, as I mentioned, I'm here just to voice my support of installing a municipal public fiber infrastructure for internet connectivity here in Santa Clara. I'm just going to give you only two reasons of many that I support this effort. The first one is Santa Clara is home to a number of residents who are working to better their situations. And Mr. Timmerman has covered masterfully all of the high level view and a lot of the details too. I've been actually very, very fascinated with the presentation, which I have not seen before, but I'm like, this is, okay, he's got all the big answers, but I'm just gonna ask you to just come down to my home on Jacob Drive and my neighbors who are on Jacob Drive. And let me just share with you a couple of reasons why this is so important to me and to my neighbors. So first of all, our environment right now is shifting from, in the world of education, we're shifting from a book-based to virtual-based learning. And we need to rely on fast and reliable internet connections. So I'm going to just give you one example of my neighbor down the street. She's a single mom who, up until COVID restrictions changed her working landscape, went to an office in downtown St. George. It's a low-wage job, but not only is she holding down that full-time job, she's also working online, exclusively online through Southern Utah University to get her bachelor's degree, and she's going to become a teacher. But all of this is online. Her job is online, and so is her education. So for when COVID hit, she was able to move home. She was required to work from home for a little while, as a lot of us were. But she could only do it if she could prove that she had reliable internet. And they tested her internet speeds and through a lot of effort and expense that she really couldn't afford at the time, she got the internet that she needed. And so she had some problems with outages and slow speeds. But as long as she has good internet connection, she can support her family and she can continue to go to school and she can better her situation. And this fiber optic network will allow her to do both with greater ease and efficiency. And I like the fact that there's no rate hikes, because that really affects a number of people in our community too. They can't afford rate hikes. So that's number one, anecdotal evidence, but I just wanted to share that with you. Number two, last year, when the COVID restrictions made it necessary for a lot of us to work from home, many Washington County residents had to come, and because there were so many people working from home, the internet connectivity and speeds were adversely affected. In my home alone, we had 4 adults working full-time, all of us internet-based, all of us doing 100% remote work. And sometimes one or two of us would have to drop off of the internet connection that we had. And at that time, that was number 3. And then in that middle, we moved to the number 4 option. But we'd have to drop off and just go grab our phone and get our personal hotspot. I don't know if you've ever had to do that, but it's just disruptive, right? It's just a disruptive situation. A fiber network would not make that necessary. So like I said, I have just retired from an 8-year career in technology. I started as a technical writer. I've been a contract administrator, and now I've just retired from being a legal operations manager at a software company. The first company I worked for was actually, originally it was RisePoint, but they were a Santa Clara based company about 22 or 23 years ago. Now they're in Salt Lake. And then just most recently, I'm retiring from Vasion, which is, if you're familiar with Tech Ridge, up where the old airport used to be, there's a brand new building up there, and it's the Vasion building, formerly known as Printer Logic. So when COVID hit, all 130 plus of our employees, local employees, had to come home and work from home. We were used to doing it because we were we're a tech company. We were used to working 100% remotely. But some of us had problems because our internet speeds were slow, or we had to actually get an actual physical Ethernet cable and plug it into our wall and plug it into our device so that it would work. So we would have enough speed to do what we needed to do to get our jobs done. Fiber would solve that problem, a fiber network. So I just wanted to, if I realized that there might, if any city council members are reluctant to do this, and maybe you don't see the need for it, but your constituents need this. Many of us do, particularly because after COVID, many people are now working in 100% remote work environments. My son actually just moved across the country back here to Utah because he got a different job it's a Boston-based company, but he can now work 100% remotely. And he needs that connectivity, to support his family. He needs to be able to keep up with, to have those upload and download speeds that we need. So even if you may not need it, I'm sure as shooting, you've got family members and friends who do need it to rely on their livelihoods. And if they come to visit you, it's really a pain most likely you've seen this happen. Like, okay, do you guys have Wi-Fi here? And you say, yeah, okay, what's your upload speed, download speed? I don't know. And then they pull up their screen and they test it, right? And if it's too slow, then they go to a different city, or they go to a different room, or they drive someplace, or an internet cafe or something where they've got the speed that they need to do the work that they do. Even if it's only for an hour, we're really dependent on that. And many in this community now are. So I just wanted you to hear from someone who's kind of in the trenches and is observing that from a perspective that is real life. And so I ask you to please allow this fiber optic network to be installed in Santa Clara. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Tiffany. Council, any other questions I did have one. Raja, talking to Gary's not here, but talking to some of the power people, there's some word on the street that you'd maybe co-locate the fiber inside the existing power conduit with the power line. Is that true?
So the design right now is all new conduit and fiber,
Okay.
not using any existing. If you have some you want to let us use, we'd love to use it.
If maybe we had some empty ones, you could probably use those.
It gets a little bit hairy if the conduits are going into power enclosures and things like that. Because
Right.
then our technicians can't get in and out of there. But if you have conduits that can be intercepted and pulled off to the side, and we can isolate it from the electrical infrastructure, then it's great. And we love taking advantage of that. That can lower the cost of the project and make the project go faster.
Yeah, that was just a concern that they'd mentioned to me. So, council, any other questions? I think it's been a great presentation.
It has been great. So just the take rate from the original founding members, was that on that original? How are they doing from, where do they stand today?
So, the original project was a totally different structure. It was basically, we're all gonna back debt and hope for the best. It didn't go well, and they spent a lot of money, and they didn't end up with, you say, hey, they backstopped $185 million of debt, but they didn't end up with $185 million of asset. I mean, there was all sorts of problems with lawsuits and challenges and canceled grants and other things that it's really messed the whole organization up for those first 10 years. Some of them internal and a lot of them were external. So those cities and their structure is that they had pledged sales tax revenues to back those bonds. They don't have a significantly higher tax burden than non-Utopia cities. It's just that's kind of where some of their money has had to go versus other cities and what the other cities typically do. But it has been a cost to those cities. But they don't have, that's Utopia. That's a different organization, and you're not partnering with Utopia. So even though it's an unfortunate situation, I go back in time and say, I didn't work for Utopia at the time. It's like, hey, maybe if I were there, there's a lot of maybes, we could have done things a little bit better. But again, a lot of that wasn't even internal. A lot of it was a lawsuit from Quest. Some of it was federal government, and some of it was the state legislature that was a big problem for Utopia. So we're past that. And so things have gone really well, but ultimately those original cities are on the hook for some debt that they're paying, and that's kind of the situation they're in. The phase 2 UIA is 100% successful and able to build and grow and expand and do new partnerships without exposing any of the partners into UIA to the downfalls at Utopia.
So on that, and I guess that's just to follow up on that, but they're the board. So has their debt been paid off?
There's two different boards. So it's not the same board.
It's not the same board?
No, there's a Utopia board and there's a UIA board.
I thought you said the original members were the board. We didn't get a seat at the table because.
So this slide is a little bit of an overcomplication because many of them are similar, but like Tremont and so I'm trying to remember which cities are not members of Utopia and they are members of UIA, but it's not exactly the same. But the representation and the financials and the contracts and everything are separate. So Utopia and UIA are separate legal entities with different board representatives. But most of those founding members of Utopia are also UIA board members, like as far as the city, but the people in those positions are different.
Yeah, I guess that's part of, again, I guess my thing is the original founding members are on the hook for the big investment. The new members.
Well, Utopia is smaller than UIA. UIA has done a lot more investment than Utopia has. It's bigger.
Did the Utopia debt get paid off?
No, it's being paid as payments come due on it over time.
But UIA's part of that's going to that or no? Are there two totally different?
They're separate.
Okay. Yeah. So what makes up the board? Then I guess I'm confused because I thought you said earlier that the board was the original founding cities and that's why we'd get a voice, but not a seat.
So there's no voice and there's no reason to be a voice at Utopia. It's done, right? It's okay. Built what it's built and it hasn't issued any new debt and done any new projects for 10 years. UIA is where everything's been happening for the last 10 years. And there are two different boards. Maybe you can put something explanation, but at UIA, it has a different board, and those people actually vote on these partnerships and what we do with, the growth and expansion and new financing and all of that. And so that board, it would make sense for you to attend those board meetings, but you would not have a vote with that board. But you are definitely involved in that project. And that's where I'd say, I can't unravel Utopia's structure and all of that. But what I can do is, have you attend the meetings and, benefit from the experiences of the other cities that would say, yeah, absolutely. Everything we wanted out of this thing we've gotten, it's going very well. The UIA, I struggle because I say Utopia Fiber. Utopia Fiber is both, but we do have to keep the things separate. But yeah.
So, and I guess let me just real quick, and then I'll let you answer on that. So my question is this, and it comes back to Councilwoman Mathis, her question. So again, the presentation is magnificent. I'm a firm believer in my career, this outside of, food, water, shelter, to be able to provide a living, internet, and having high-speed internet is critical, and only going to get more critical to provide a living. My thought is this: as we go down the road, and I see this growing. You're saying it's growing at $700 a month. I think that's only going to increase at $30 a month. At what point, if we end up with 50%, 60% statewide, it's 40% that's a base. At what point, what does determine that $30 a month comes down? How does, if this just continues to increase, who determines if? I think so. And again, I think that's the whole technology thing is the initial technology comes out very expensive as it becomes grander and bigger. So I guess who determines, and I guess that's where I misunderstood, is who determines when that happens?
So say, we go back and say, okay, UIA, this has gone really, really well. We actually have pretty healthy cash reserves at this point. We're building out the last remaining areas of the original cities, and now it's all kind of going into the new partnership of cities, and all of those projects are successful. So UIA certainly is going to be in a position to do some good things. What do those good things mean, and when do those happen? And good things isn't profits, it's not investors, it's the organization should be in a position to lower the cost of service, to pay off bonds, and it's like, well, which of those triggers do we do when? Well, it's not my decision, is the board's decision. And if I went and asked them, they'd say, well, we don't know, because we don't know which is going to be most important to us 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years into the future. And we want to maintain flexibility that we can always do what's in the best interests of all of the cities collectively. And again, it kind of goes into some of that. We can make some commitments. We can go in there and say, we're not going to charge you a higher price of service than other cities. And so it's likely that all cities are going to get far more benefit than they would collectively than they would individually, because a lot of our revenues aren't even coming from our cities. We have a lot of from these 16 cities, there's a lot of revenue coming in outside of these cities. And that grows very substantially. So we kind of have an opportunity to bring far more benefit to the cities than you would ever get if you were put in your own individual box of downside, upside, risk, and all that other stuff. At the same time, it's like, well, what are the triggers for when your bond does get paid off? Like, we don't know. And we're not willing to make any commitments because it may make sense to pay that off in 10 years or 15 years or whatever. And so what I would just say is, assume it's the worst case scenario that you are on the hook for the 25 years. We absolutely expect and hope that we'll be able to do better than that by paying that off early and lowering the cost of service. But it's always going to be something we revisit every year with our board to, discuss and try to decide what's in the best interest of the cities. And the board is actually 9 of those cities at UIA. It's all but Perry and Tremont, if I remember right.
But UIA is not, I guess, so that's, you've answered
not-
that. UIA is not paying off the bad debt of Utopia.
It's not, it has no contractual obligations or
Okay.
anything to Utopia from a debt perspective. There is cost sharing. And so, we do have where, like am I employee of Utopia or UIA? Yeah, we're all employees of Utopia. But UIA pays Utopia for the use of facilities, the backbone and the early expenses and the early network were paid for by Utopia. So there are ways that UIA pays Utopia for services, but it isn't like just issuing checks to Utopia, right? It's only for consideration of actual services it receives. We have to treat them separately. Like UIA bought our building and the Utopia pays rent to UIA. So is that right? Yeah. She does it makes her life miserable because we have to keep two separate sets of books. And so she knows all the triggers on how we have to manage that.
I think I wanted to mention
Yeah.
quickly how UIA came in. There's some confusion about why are the boards different. And in 2008, 2009, 2010, it was clear that Utopia, as it stood, wasn't going to make it. And these cities just refused to let the dream die. They just wanted to keep going. And so that's when UIA was formed. It was formed as a financing arm of Utopia. Utopia couldn't issue debt anymore. And so these cities got together and said, let's pledge some more franchise fees and let's form a new entity, local government entity, so that we can continue to build out this infrastructure. And that's why the boards are separate and why the UIA board exists. I don't know if that helps.
Yeah.
I think there was an argument in there too that including Perry and Tremont was actually going to harm the credit rating of UIA. It actually put the organization in a better financing position to decrease the membership of the growth phase. But those cities did get built out completely. So.
But the board of UIA is the original ones less
there's
Perry and Tremont.
9 member cities.
Okay.
So it's minus Tremont and Perry.
Okay.
That's right. Payson kind of was out, but then they came back. It's a long story. We wish we could just flatten it all and make it one organization and simplify things. But from your perspective, it actually is a nice structure because it does create a very clear line of your obligations are tied to 100% success with healthy cash position and none of the Utopia debt obligations and contracts and things there. So it wasn't intended to be that, but it just kind of came out that way.
Okay, well, I'm sure there'll be more questions and more discussion. We've got a lot of things to cover tonight, and so I'm going to thank you guys for your presentation. Appreciate you being here.
Is there any next steps or?
I think council will probably have some discussion with Brock and we'll be in touch.
Great, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, council, item 2.3, short-term rental update. Brock?
Thank you. All right. So recently we've had some discussion about short-term rentals. And we know that we have a considerable amount in the city and more developments projects that are looking to come to Santa Clara with a vacation rental option. So I have done up the, a question was asked in our last meeting of where do we want to go? How many do we want to have? How many are we going to turn into just a resort community? Is that the route that we want to go? So I just put some numbers together showing where we currently are with what is already been approved, what is out there for Santa Clara City right now currently in the vacation rental market. So currently we have roughly 332 vacation rentals that just short of that are actually in the ground, they're being built or there with 438 units approved in the Edge at Grand Desert, which would give us a total of 770 vacation rental units. So currently at that rate, we have 2,716 residential connections. It says 313 of those being vacation rentals, which is 11.5% of our utility connections are vacation rentals. And if you add on that 438 right there of 770, give us 3,173 connections, which would put us up to 24% of our utility connections would be vacation rentals. So the discussion is back to city council as we look forward, and we see these projects coming. Direction to staff as people come in and talk about vacation rentals. Where are we going? What direction to staff to say, yes, bring them back? No, we're done. Do we want to go look at putting a complete halt on vacation rentals for Santa Clara City?
On the edge of Grand Desert, none of those are built yet, right?
They are not built at this time, no, but they have been approved.
Have any idea when they will start building?
I do not.
We have been approached, the city has been approached by one of the property owners that's part of Edge Grand Desert about being able to move forward, but there's been nothing submitted. You guys reapproved the preliminary plat for the first phase a meeting or two ago. And so it's still a viable project, but nothing has come into TRC recently. I haven't seen any new drawings on it. Yeah. However, Matt, and I know the development agreement with Black Desert's not approved, but in the land use plan that was approved for Black Desert, is there short-term rentals identified in there? I know it's a conditional use, but did the land plan show anything that way?
I don't think the land plan showed anything specific on that. I'd have to pull it up and look at it.
They would want to do the resort. I mean, originally it was a motel, big resort.
Mhm.
I would think the resort would be a little bit offended about vacation rentals to come in and compete with them, but
Yeah, I was just curious if there had been anything in that land use plan.
I mean, I know that was an element of their plan, but I don't recall if it was part of the plan that was approved. So,
And you guys are aware that Robert Smith is pursuing some on his piece up west of Arcadia as well. So I think we're,
just north of Pocatello Springs.
I think that's kind of where Brock his staff is looking for input when we have developers coming into TRC and starting to talk about short-term rentals. Is the city still open to that? Do we want to, like I think you said the county had put a moratorium on vacation rental type properties. Sean's, oh shoot, David, you had one job and that was to keep Sean in that chair. Because it was like coming to him for a question and he left. I'll leave that to the St. George City attorney. I was going to ask him what St. George City is.
He might be out there.
Is he out
He's
there?
Out there
Tell him that he's on deck.
on the hot seat.
Just curious, has there been any discussions at St. George?
Yeah,
This is your chance to.
Mike, I'm not concerned about vacation rentals as much as I am, what do we want? I mean, I think where Pocatello Springs and everything is already got surrounded, I mean, that 20 acres, but I don't want to see a mixed use in there. But
That was my concern.
at what point, I mean, if we end up 24% of all of our units for vacation rental, that's a pretty transient community.
Well, and
here comes one of the transients now.
Hey, we just wanted to get you on the minutes.
I don't know if I'm qualified when you have the esteemed Matt Ince sitting up here on the dais.
no, my last meeting was with him.
It was actually.
This is like asking twice as much of me in one day. It's
And
rough.
if you notice when you said short-term rental, I bolted right out the door.
We did. And I was just looking for some input. If St. George City, I mean, the county's put a kind of a moratorium on it. We're talking about how many more. Is St. George City having similar discussions? Anything you can, short-term rentals?
Short-term rentals. I can tell you right now with the way we have our ordinance structured and the amenities that are required for short-term rentals, we don't see any new ones being approved right now on the horizon. Our focus now is on encouraging, and Matt can tell you that from a meeting we had today, developers that are coming in to say, we don't want to see the short-term rental projects right now. We would like to see more townhomes, not apartments, but townhomes, individual ownerships, houses that people can buy, that those young families that are starting out can afford to get into and own actually. So we believe we have over 2,000 illegal short-term rentals in St. George alone. And we have quite a number of legal short-term rentals, as you know, up at the Ledges, Green Valley, down at Sun River, for example. And what we would like to focus on right now is getting housing that people can get into, not apartments, although we're still approving apartments. But when developers come in and say, as they have so often, approve this 300-unit apartment complex so that people can get affordable housing, we're saying that's not affordable housing. We'd like to see more. In fact, we have a tiny home project that was just approved off Dixie Drive that we're kind of getting our feet wet on to see how that looks with some parameters on it to make sure that it looks good and stays good, but provides that housing source. We had, by the way, quite a discussion at this last legislative session to try to get back some of our ability to enforce the short-term rental ordinances. And what we were saying is, look how many units that we have in Southern Utah that we can make available for our permanent residents right now that are being used illegally as short-term rentals and therefore not providing housing for the people that live here. Another problem we're having right now is several of our apartment complexes have started charging separately for parking, which we believe they have no right to do. When we approve their site plans, we approve, as you do, a number of stalls that are required to be there for each unit. But another way to make money for some that came in and pitched those apartment complexes as affordable places for people to live.
Sean's a great resource, counsel. If you have any questions. I appreciate him being here. Appreciate that insight, Sean. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bring it back to you, counsel. What are your feelings?
Well, the number, Mayor, on the 24%, that's a staggering number, although half of that isn't even close to starting. And we've got other home develop. I mean, I think we have to look at right now we have 11.5% of the city is under that. And realistically, even if the Grand Desert started today, they're a long ways out with other housing coming in, other that we've already approved with more to come. So it's a hard thing because, again, we could look at a number, and I think this as a city, we could say, look, we'd like to have no more than X amount of percentage, and something you could monitor that way. And they still have to meet all the amenities and things like that. But, this is real helpful to see all this.
I agree. I think we probably ought to set a percentage cap. I'm not sure Edge at Grand Desert's going to happen. So it may not. I know we've extended that, but I would echo what Sean said. My concern when we had our last work meeting was that townhome project that got turned into apartments, and now we have the same issue. We don't have anything that's reasonable to accommodate young families moving back. And I think that should also be our focus. I echo exactly what he said.
Now, didn't we just run a water line to the Edge to help the Edge with their development? That's interesting that it's not going to happen, and we went to the expense of getting that water line.
Well, it might. I mean, it's still approved.
It's going to be developed.
At some point it will. It just may not be all vacation rentals.
And the water line also looped the existing city system. There's some other city benefits that came along with it. It wasn't strictly for the Edge. And if the Edge doesn't develop, something will end up developing on that particular site. I was meeting with, or talking to the Silverado property owners today. They own the property to the east of Harmon's on Pioneer Parkway. And they're trying to come up with a master plan. They've met with the city and kind of got your feelings a couple of months ago, and they're trying to finalize a master plan that has a mix of residential options with it. They're still looking at a few of the man caves on that hard to use piece. There's a hard to use property north of the store. They're also looking at a small apartment project and a larger townhome project in there. And they're struggling with the densities, trying to get to the densities to accommodate the infrastructure. And it seems like everything the developers talk about right now is density based. I think right now our short-term rental conditional use permit requires certain things that, in my opinion, have made those projects successful in Santa Clara. And I think we need to be very protective of those things. The increased amenities, not just a pool, but an Arcadia pool, a water park type pool, a project like David built out there. I want to give former Councilman Whitehead props for the ordinance that he helped the city develop that allowed the conditional use for short-term rentals to happen, because I think that's been very successful. And your project that you build in accordance with that ordinance has kind of proved that. And hopefully you're seeing the same success that visually is apparent out there when you go out there or try and call and make a reservation. So thank you for that. And I think we need to protect that. We're probably going to get pressed a little bit. Robert Smith's project's pressed it a little bit on trying to intermingle in it or dilute it or whatever. I think we need to be strong and protect it. The other thing I think we need to look at is the bonus density that we have in there now that lets them go from 8 to 12. And I still believe we need to have some thresholds in that and I'm not saying on the top end thresholds, but maybe some low end thresholds. We're not going to have affordable townhomes if they have to go build water parks to get them approved, to get that bonus density. But they ought to have something as part of that. And so we may want to go back and look at that a little bit. I think if we keep the integrity of the short-term rental ordinance, I think it'll enforce itself because of the amount of money that has to go into them and the management and everything else that's part of that. A separate project, isolated by itself. I think that will limit the future applications for it, or it'll build projects that we may welcome. That become revenue producers for the city, employment centers for the city, help offset some of our infrastructure costs, help supplement our impact fee accounts. All of those things provide long-term revenues in the form of bedroom taxes and those other things that we receive. I think those can be beneficial to us. But I agree with everybody that I think that we need to do some focus on trying to provide some housing that can be attainable. I don't think it'll ever be affordable anymore, but maybe it can be attainable. Maybe we can attain it. And so that's kind of what I think.
And I think that we have to be looking outside of the box. I remember affordable housing. One of the real problems right now is, like Ben and these builders have experienced, permitting fees are $30,000. And that's going into our coffers. Are we willing to make amends with our impact fees to kind of offset the affordability of a townhome project coming in? I mean, those are, if we're really trying to help people attain homes, to me, we've got to look at every single aspect, because land costs are certainly not coming down for the normal individual. And so what can we do as a council to help offset the costs we don't want to shortchange our public infrastructure, but if there was, maybe the water district would be willing to cut their fee.
Nope.
Put that on your list, water district.
And
I'll ask Zach in the morning.
so on that, just a quick, My brother and I had a discussion on that today, which does worry me when you start saying, well, we'll cap it at this or do this, because I mean, you can go back, the data shows any city that's put any moratorium on building costs skyrocket.
Oh, yeah.
Home prices skyrocket because now you've eliminated the competition. But Lena and what we were just visiting about as these townhome projects come in, and we may want to look strongly at this, that, you know, we're approving a townhome project, assuming it's going to be sold, that there will be an end user, somebody that can come in and buy this. And again, the affordability side, and I'll stand on, you know, I'll probably get criticized of this, but if we want to start on affordability, let's start on money management and, you know, good credit scores. Let's put something back on the users that, look, there's things you need to do to get into affordable homes, and being able to achieve a lower interest rate is probably first and foremost. But we don't, you know, that never really gets talked about in those meetings. But I do think we may want to look at our ordinance, and certainly we may want to review the vacation part and talk about amenities, like you said, Mayor. But we may want to, as we get into approval of future projects, because I don't think we've ever expected townhome projects to not be sold. You know, also now it's a rental project, and I think that caught us all off guard. And that's not the only place. That's happening all over the county.
And I'm going to look to the city attorney to tell us how you stop that.
Change your ordinances.
Well, but the city doesn't regulate if property that's owned can be rented.
Yeah, the enforcement.
How do you enforce that can only be sold to the person who is going to own it and live there?
Well, I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say, but to it again, yeah, if somebody bought it, they have the right to rent it. But basically, if it's developer controlled, if I go build a townhome project and don't sell a single one of it, I've built an apartment complex.
If you sell it to Ben Shakespeare Jr., Ben Shakespeare Jr. didn't build it.
Yeah.
So ownership passes once and now he can rent it. I'm going to come back to the attorney because we had some discussions 15 years ago about trying to keep something that somebody can buy and maybe something that can be affordable. And discounted and impact fee is a one-time discount. And the first guy who buys it, unless there's a control, that just becomes a profit margin for the first sale. How do you keep it that way? And those types of discussions
Well, FHA does.
Yeah, the only way to
They
restrict
sell
it.
within 2 years, the profits split, and you don't get to take your full capital.
yeah, but it didn't stay as affordable housing either.
No,
Yeah,
that's what I'm saying.
The only way to really
But that
restrict
keeps
that is to put
homeowner in
affordable
there.
housing covenants on the property so that they run with the property regardless of who owns it.
So maybe we should look at use our density bonus provision and use that as a provision for affordability and offer some incentives in the density bonus to say, if you're willing to do this, then here's some calm deed restrictions, whatever it is you're going to put on there, put those on there and say, we'll allow you this density if you'll do
And see,
these many units.
I'd like to see the housing attainable, the hack, like the right acronym, the hack that there's a meeting on the 23rd, I think, talk about it. I'd like to see them go down that road a little bit. Because I think it's more than just the design of the product. It's the limitations on what you can do with it after you get into it.
I do think that that's already happening some places in Utah. In fact, I seem to remember working on a property in Park City a few years back that had that kind of a covenant on it. Not exactly what you're talking about, but it would be the same method of doing it.
Maybe
So-
we can look into some stuff like that.
Another option would be to work with SwitchPoint on something. They did the Riverwalk project down south of St. George, and as far as I know, it's been very successful. And when I went to the ribbon cutting, there was definitely they really invited the other cities to consider partnering to provide that sort of housing in their community as well. So we could certainly reach out to them because they have that set up now where it is controlled and you can't sell it. And anyways, they have all that figured out basically for that type of a project, not a townhome project, but that would be another option for us.
those are the types of things I'd like to see us look at a little bit more at and pursue.
You know, they built that project with St. George money, with federal money, with state money, with
A lot
fundraising.
of
It was a lot went into it, but it looks beautiful and I think it's working really well. And it is providing that housing that just wasn't available to those people before.
Mayor, maybe David would like to address a little bit of that vacation rental attitude. Is there a saturation point? Is there a time when, I mean, the last man in is always the conservative, but you've dealt with it both as a city council and as a developer. What's your feeling?
Things dramatically changed with the pandemic. Prior to the pandemic, my stats showed that we were kind of at a saturation point, especially for the 3 and 4 bedroom. But that all changed. We have right now, well, as of yesterday, when I looked in the greater St. George area, there was only one vacation home on the MLS. You know, some developments have some that are coming up, but there was one listed on the MLS. And so the greater St. George area is all the way from Washington to Ivans and from Bloomington up to the ledges up there. And there's one home, $2.4 million. So that's it for sale. There's just such a demand for something. Investors are willing to purchase homes for low as a 4% cap rate. Before the pandemic, they were 7.5%. So they're willing to come down on their returns in order to get into anything that will deliver any type of a return. So there's a big demand for it. There's a lot of people wanting to come to Southern Utah to visit. In August, Southern Utah St. George was rated as the #1 drive-to vacation location. So
that's the way I feel. St. George, I just drive through.
So we're found out people want to come here. It's a great place to be, a great place to vacation. So there's a demand for it. What happens once tourism really starts picking up in other places, like the airports are starting to open up, cruise lines will soon open up. Are we going to see the return back to the way it was prior to the pandemic? Probably not. It will probably still be better because more people are aware of Southern Utah, but there will be some balance. And so at that point, when people are spending $1 million on a 4-bedroom vacation home, but then their occupancy rate drops and their rates come down a little bit, that's going to be an expensive home to carry. And we may see some more coming on the market. Then of course, it's not going to be so appealing to build so many homes.
So as a city councilman, if you were still sitting on the city council, we know there's marketability for them. Does that drive it? Or are we looking at the community and saying, where do we draw the line and keep the residential community as a priority versus the transient community as a priority?
Well, I mean, you certainly could have both. It's
Right.
just, the vacation homes, I've always believed that vacation rentals need to be separate from residential. I mean, there's always problems when you mix the two. But I mean, definitely you're making some revenues for the city with the vacation rentals. You get the 3% tax plus half of the transient tax, or no, 1% of the transient tax, something like that. It's about 4.25%. And rates have gone up 35% just in the last 3 or 4 months. It's unbelievable what these homes are renting for. It's very advantageous for the developer, for a builder to build vacation homes because they sell for about 50% or more than a regular single family home. So the money is driving it.
Yeah.
That will stop as soon as the demand slows down. But for now, if you're a builder and you're looking, well, I could make $200,000 more on this home, of course, that's what you're probably going to want to do. There's a terrible need for affordable homes. I don't know how these young families are going to get into a home. I mean, interest rates are low, which is wonderful, but it's also driving investors because there's a lot of good investment loans too to buy these homes and then rent them out. And so the cash buyer generally wins out. And a lot of times when I have buyers trying to buy a cheap home under 500,000, cheap home, it's multiple offers and a cash buyer usually wins. So unless they're paying way over price and then they take off their contingency for an appraisal, which is really wrong. I mean, that's really hard on a first time home buyer because then they have to come in with the difference. And a lot of times they just can't. So affordable housing would be wonderful. But how do you do it? Land cost, I mean, raw land at 165, 200,000 an acre. How do you do it?
Well, in real
Impact
estate,
fee.
always been cyclically. I mean,
Yeah.
there's highs and
Oh, yeah.
there's lows.
And there will be a
maybe you
cycle.
buy at the low time, but right now is not the
Right.
time for a youthful buyer. But if you're market driven, then you let the market handle it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that becomes a problem for new home buyers.
Mm.
And
Yeah, I mean, you want me to look in a crystal ball, and I have no idea what's going to happen.
It's on the mayor's desk.
Oh, is it?
I've rubbed it
I
there.
really need it. I really need it. But in the 80s in California, the prices just jumped up like 30-40%, and then they just plateaued. People thought they would come back down. They never did. And we're kind of in that situation now where we have so many people moving here, and I don't see that changing so much just because, in fact, there's a Bloomberg report that came out today that showed that about 60% of the people say that, well, 3 or fewer days in the office is what we anticipate doing from here on out. And if they could work from home, they're going to move to a rural area that's safe and beautiful and with all the activities that they want to do. And so I think as long as people have that option, we're just going to continue to grow, and prices will probably stay high.
so what do you tell staff?
They're listening, right?
I actually have one more question for you.
Okay.
You, as from a developer standpoint, mentioned you had concerns mixing uses, vacation, rental, residential. I have concerns with that as well, but I'm curious what your concerns are from the developer standpoint.
Sure. So if you have a residential home next to a vacation home, you're undoubtedly going to have noise. I mean, a vacation home is it's a vacation home. People are vacationing. They are up doing things. I mean, if there's a pool at a vacation home, they're going to be swimming in that pool till late at night. They're there to have fun. I mean, most vacationers are families like us, and we go out and go on vacation. We enjoy time with our family, but a lot of times we're coming in late or early morning, and a lot of times some of these vacation homes have a lot of people in them. So when you have 15, 20 people or more, I mean, some vacation homes have 40, 50 people. Yeah. It's going to be noisy and loud and a lot of activity. And you don't get to know your neighbor. They're transient. And so residential neighborhood, I mean, people are purchasing a home in a residentially zoned neighborhood, wanting to get to know their neighbors, wanting that stability. And I think that zoning needs to be protected. I think that's really important. If you want to buy a home next to a vacation home community, or next to a zoned business community, a commercial zone, at least okay, well, eventually there's going to be a commercial building there. But we have the zoning too, so people know what they're going to be getting. That's my opinion.
Perfect. Thank you.
I think that's the most important part about the short-term rental is everybody knows the day they buy it. Every home in there is a vacation rental.
You know what you're getting. I mean, Paradise Village, we don't have any full-time residents there. Well, I'm not on the board anymore, but as of 6 months ago, we don't have any permanent residents. And probably 15% don't rent it out. They just use it for their own families that come down.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate you being here tonight.
Can I add just one comment on that?
Absolutely.
So I was just having visions of what it would look like if we put that 24% in our newsletter. I know not everyone reads the newsletter, but I would probably get quite a few calls that a quarter of our town is going to be vacation rentals. So that's my feedback, that's probably scary for a lot of citizens. The 11.5 sounds pretty, that's doable. That's not a big chunk of our city, but giving up a quarter of our city and maybe even more now, that is pretty scary.
But you didn't give us credit for the homes that have been approved, have you, for Sullivan's and?
No.
Does that offset that percentage?
Yeah. So again, it's kind of unfair to say we've approved Desert Edge, but I don't think Brock's added in everything else that's been approved that hasn't been built to date.
True.
You've still got.
And you got potential. I mean, I had nothing to take into account, but as the mayor talked about it, the development agreement for Black Desert. And with Black Desert, we know that's a resort, and also on that we don't know those numbers as well. But I did not take into account the Solace and Desert Village, Herd Heights, those numbers.
I'm more concerned about the residents that wanted to pitchfork us over an assisted living facility, how they'd feel about a switch point facility in town. That's got me. I mean, if we're going to talk affordable housing, because your next parcel's coming in, or half acre lots starting at 400,000.
Everybody talks about approving affordable housing.
Till it's in their
It's
back.
all political will. It's right here.
Yeah.
I'm looking at it.
I know.
We all get to make
Can we go
that
back
call.
to the compensation plan? Can we start this from the top?
So does that give you some feedback?
Yeah.
Preserve the
So what-
integrity of the ordinance?
The ordinance, it'll filter itself out as we enforce the
Let's-
ordinance.
Let's go back and look at the,
Look at attainable
PD.
housing and what we can do that way to make things, whether deed restrictions or whatnot. So we can work with.
let's look at the PD ordinance and the density bonus section and some ways to try and develop some attainable housing.
So we'll get with Matt.
Hey, we only got 7 more items. Just hang in there.
We'll work with Matt and our city planner on working on that. So.
But I do think as a council mayor, I think listening to everybody, we all share the concern that they can't be mixed. A nightly rental community and a residential community cannot. I agree. I think we were concerned I think that was our biggest concern there. And so I do think if there's direction for staff, I think that's clear direction.
That should help staff. Okay. Let's see. Are you guys here for a specific item or just for giggles?
Just enjoying the show.
What are you here for? What's your name? Come on up to the mic.
We'll put you.
Robert Smith.
Oh, is this Robert?
I'm Robert Smith.
I
Yeah.
haven't seen you for years,
How are you,
Robert.
Rick? Good to see
It's
you.
good to see you, sir. You just had the opportunity to listen to that.
It was great. I love hearing from all the comments. And, I'm glad to be here. Thanks for giving me just a minute. I guess I have a lot of thoughts on vacation rentals. I have an interest in them, just like David does. I've taken a little bit different approach in how I've managed mine with on-site property management. I think that makes a big difference. And I think that really sets what I've done at Arcadia apart from others in Santa Clara and St. George and Washington. And I think that's a key element. And so it's something that with my project that I was proposing, I was wanting to have that be a key element to I hear the comments tonight of, not having vacation rentals and residential communities, mixed or combined. And that was not my intent when I came, last week and spoke with you last week from the phone with my new development that I'm trying to get approved for. My intent there was first and foremost to try to get get to that a closer, we say attainable or affordable, attainable housing. I don't know exactly if that's possible or not. It's tough to get there. It sure is. So attainable is more of a, more realistic or more, maybe a better goal. But my approach to get there was to do the vacation rentals and segregate them on the south end of my property as much as possible. Separate them from the residential side, and I've got a packet of to hand out that I was going to present tonight and show kind of how we've done that, the revisions we've made since last week's meeting. I can still pass. I've got packets. I realize that I can't pull up anything to show you anything, but we've made some revisions, and I wanted to show that to you. But anyway, so my point in wanting to do a portion of vacation rentals was to absorb all the cost of all the amenities, the great amenities that I want to do: the clubhouse, the pools, the pickleball courts, the tennis courts, that the whole community could benefit from, not just the vacation rentals, but the full-time residents as well could benefit from those, instead of doing two separate amenities and kind of smaller, lesser quality amenities. Combine them up into one great set of amenities, and have the vacation rentals absorb all that cost and not add that onto the cost of for the cost for all the full-time residents. I can go back and work that plan up and see if there's a different way to do that. One option I had was, well, do I want to try to request the whole subdivision to be vacation rentals? And that wasn't my goal or my intent to try to say, okay, I want to develop 200 more homes and I want them all to be vacation rentals. I didn't want to have that message come across that I was trying to get 200 more vacation, because all I wanted was I guess a portion of it to be, for vacation rentals. Did I answer your question that you asked me, or what I came up here to stand up here? I've got a lot of notes and a lot of thoughts, and I don't think tonight kind of went as I thought it was going to be, because I was trying to come here to kind of address a lot of the concerns that were last week, the parking concerns, which we've addressed those. We've added street parking. We've added parallel parking along the side. We've made some arrangements of how we've separated the vacation rentals from the full-time residents. So I guess just in trying to wrap things up, and I know you guys got 5 or 6 more items you're trying to get to tonight and want to get home, and I understand it. You guys are, I look at you all being up here and think, wow, what a great commitment every week you have to be here. So I think it's very commendable. But I guess in my thought, my process, I think it is possible to have, I wouldn't say a mix of vacation rentals but they can coexist next to each other. And I've tried to create separation through fences and through layout and through design and to the points that David brought up about noise and late nights at the pool. I mean, my management company has always been there to let people know at closing time it's time to go. We've turned off the music, or 7 o'clock at evening, so that's not a problem that we have. We have staff that's there. We have security that comes 2 or 3 times, 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock to get those that have hopped the fence or trying to sneak in or whatever. I mean, we've gone to great lengths to really make sure that we're not being a nuisance to the city. We're not disturbing our neighbors next door. And we would continue to do that. And the big groups he mentioned, large groups, 30, 40 people. We don't have anything that is ever that big. The rentals I was seeking approval for were 1, 2, and 3 bedrooms, 700 square feet, 900 square feet, 1,300 square feet units that are sleep 4, 8, 10 people. And that's the cutoff. The limit is not, you get how many people you can squeeze into a 700 foot home. Anyway, I appreciate you giving me a minute just to talk here for just a second. would it be okay if I passed out what I prepared to bring down here tonight?
So, yeah, I think so.
Let me grab those. Thank you so much.
And you're more than welcome to take it TRC in the morning. I can make a special thing to get you on the agenda if you want to talk to staff.
And I mean, I have 3 times, and I'm welcome to talk to them some more. And I guess I'm not sure what more direction to go with them. Our third or fourth revision with them.
Thank you.
In your spare time tonight between people walking to the podium, this top page shows the site plan revisions.
Oh, you here, let's get thanks.
Oh, no
That's
problem.
okay.
Anyway, my main objective in that was to address the concerns from last week's meeting with primarily parking and how to separate the two uses.
Do you mind sharing maybe just why we've got it in hand, Mayor? Do you mind just sharing the changes that were made?
Yeah, so we've added parallel parking. Along the bottom, along the south end.
Robert, do you have preset like on a flash drive or anything?
I emailed it all to Corey yesterday, and I'm not sure. I mean, I have it on my computer, but I don't have it on a flash drive right now to hand me, so I'll hand it to you.
Christelle, would it be possible, do you have your computer with you or laptop or anything?
Yeah.
Would he be able to email it to you? Would you be able to put it on the screen from there? You could email it to Christelle. Put it up there. Do you have her email address, Robert?
I should.
Okay.
Is there a Wi-Fi I can connect to?
SC City Guest.
Okay. Is there a password?
Swiss stays all lowercase, one word.
If we can look at the old one.
In the meantime.
Okay, I just forwarded that to you, Christelle. Thank you so much. This means a lot to me. I hope we don't have.
Yeah. Apologize for the confusion.
I feel bad that it's taken a minute here, and you've got a lot on the agenda. It's a big file. I mean, let me know if it.
No. But I'm the wrong person to ask that question to.
I'm a little warm. Yeah.
If you tell me how to do it, I'll change it. Just push the arrow down.
Brock.
Okay, just said it's now.
Be making ice cubes in here tonight. It's a real thing.
Maybe it is.
Do it. I told you. I brought him and it's gonna be long.
Hang in there, chief. We'll talk fireworks in a little bit. Water rates,
Budget review.
budget review. Where'd Deb go? Some hang in there, staff.
I have a question on the firework thing that might benefit Destin anyways.
We haven't gone to 11 o'clock for a long time.
That'll work.
I'll be rummy by 9.
My husband's at Aaronic Priesthood Camp, so I don't even have anywhere to be.
Date night.
I'm not even gonna go home and cook dinner. I'll probably go home and have cold cereal.
SpaghettiOs.
That's right. I guess your word left for that today too, right?
Yeah, I was down 2 kids in my house.
You were?
Yeah, it's weird.
Awesome.
Okay. I can make those.
Well, 2 kids and 75% of the fighting. So it really is significant.
Yeah, I'll just respond directly to him. Okay.
What's that? I set one on that podium I gave to Mr. Timmerman.
I do.
There was.
What are you looking, you gave it back to you, didn't he?
I've got one right here if you want to just use this. I have no idea what's on it, but
Oh, I'm good. I won't go to sleep now. Did you get a diet? Is there a diet one in there?
I didn't see that, but
You know, I tell you what,
it's probably hiding in there.
whoever buys the pop, they don't get some Diet Mountain Dew. Chris is cleaning up.
yeah.
You can get it on your phone, Chris.
No, she had somewhere to be.
Anybody need a cookie? There's a whole bunch of cookies right here.
I should be buying.
If you're all.
I had.
Hey, the jazz game starts in like 30 minutes, so.
For his service on the board.
Yeah, I'm hoping that Chief and Justin are doing their speed reading.
Still hasn't come through on your end, huh? Chris, still hasn't come through on your email? Still didn't come through on your email?
Oh, no, I've lost my quorum. I was gonna jump fire restriction. I lost my quorum.
Oh, you lost. He'll be here.
He's doing that. We could cover 2 of these items.
It's on my list.
Get a councilman back. Come on, Dave, stick around for a water rate increase.
Probably stick around for Robert and then excuse myself.
No, thank you for coming.
Thank you, guys.
So do you know who was in the very back? That was Don Willie.
I was thinking that was Don, but
Yeah.
I can't see anybody behind that.
So here, we can get.
Yeah.
All right, you got a quorum, Mayor.
Christelle, see that row of chairs behind the podium? Next council meeting, they don't want to be there.
All right. They gotta be gone, huh?
They gotta be gone.
Maybe next week we'll have a few more chairs. We'll get that row gone.
Disappeared. All I see are head tops.
Okay. They'll all be here to listen to Debbie's presentation on the budget.
There was a bunch of them just standing outside waiting. I keep getting text messages about it too. You close, Robert?
Yeah, I just got to eject the thumb drive now.
We could do power shuts down in what, 5 minutes?
Yeah, we could do the firework. Go to fireworks.
Go to
Mayor.
fireworks. Okay, we're gonna go to fireworks restrictions, Chief. You just keep working, Robert.
Okay, well, as you know, we're in a drought, and the 5-county area is actually in stage 1 fire restrictions now, which means no open flames, no fireworks, no campfires outside designated camping areas. So, and you're probably aware of what our neighbors, St. George, have done with fireworks. They've limited the fireworks to designated areas in the city parks. Ivans is doing similar with just allowing fireworks in the park areas.
Yeah, I probably should.
So we had a discussion with staff last TRC regarding what we want to do here in Santa Clara City. And so, you know, you look all around, there are fires going off every day. St. George has 2 or 3 sometimes a day. Hurricane's got quite a bit. So what I'd like to do is restrict the area for fireworks. We do have a map attached. Can you bring that up so we can look at that? So basically, we just want to kind of choke it down to those areas, those residential areas that we feel are safer for fireworks. We don't want to have anything in the South Hills area, obviously, or any of those open areas where it has a potential to cause a wildfire or cause a large fire. I did notice on this map, there are a couple areas I'd still like to restrict down just off of Pioneer Parkway a little bit. And we did have a discussion of allowing fireworks in Goobler Park in the hard parking area. Would be a good area for people to go and light fireworks. However, there is an ordinance, city ordinance that says no fireworks are allowed in city parks. So,
Well, right across from the parking area is also vacant land.
I believe it's no, without, I believe
without
consent of the
without
council.
approval.
Yeah, council could.
So if
Make that
council
allowable.
wishes, we could, you know, make an exception to allow or approve for fireworks during the 4th and the 24th is what we're looking at. So my thoughts are come to council, see what your feelings are. If you like this map, if you want to see some areas even more restricted, what are your thoughts and feelings on that? I can see Denny's got a.
Well, my
he's ready to-
feeling is, unless we get some rain, I think we need a fire restriction on fireworks, period,
Citywide.
citywide.
And we have had that, you know, I would personally, as a fire chief, like to see fireworks restricted to just one small area, perhaps the city park. I think if we restricted it totally or banned it, we may
You have a bigger
potentially open
problem.
ourselves up to a lawsuit or something that way, where we're taking business away from some folks. But if we provided an area where they could light fireworks, you know, it's less.
A couple of kids on bikes already did that, right?
Yeah, yeah, you're right. So I guess I'm looking for your thoughts and feelings on what you'd like to see.
I like the map. I think I'm chuckling because I have to go across the street to Jim Ence's house to go light fireworks. I'm banned, but he's not. So
Certain decisions we make.
I was going to say, I could tell somebody, we know that's a fire starter right there.
Well, and I like the map. I don't mind the map, but I look up on Julie Drive and I'm not sure why Julie Drive is exempt, honestly.
Yeah.
Because the homes right across the street aren't. And they're just across the parkway and there's no barren ground anywhere.
Yeah. And again, we need to maybe look, this is our first draft of this map. We can tweak it just a little bit before we put it on the website and notice the citizens. I did notice myself, there's some areas that I'd like to put as restricted, and that could be one of them, Julie Drive area.
Well, that one's already restricted, but I think it shouldn't be.
Okay.
I think the
Just my
map should be
opinion.
any property adjacent to open space. And so, I mean, I can see why, again, we've got the river and open space in front. I think basically any property that borders the town.
Yeah, and we actually have it written that it's within 150 feet of any drainage, open area, open field that you cannot, it's a restricted area. You cannot light fireworks. So we've tried to incorporate all those lots and areas that are adjacent to those open areas as restricted.
Yeah, I'm with Lena, it seems like Julie Drive and Nicholas,
And Nicholas.
all that.
Yeah, I agree.
Like the interior parts of those neighborhoods wouldn't be 150 feet to an open area. And then I also noticed over on, you go to the corner of Pioneer Parkway and then Red Mountain Drive, those lots have been developed. That there's that little,
Yeah.
so we could take that off because that's not open space anymore.
Red Mountain and Adobe.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So I
Oh,
think
yeah.
part of those may be because they're close within that 200 feet to an open area, but we'll look at that a little closer.
I think
If
the
you
one
wanna
that
open those.
they're about, it used to be a vacant lot. I think it still shows vacant on the map, but there's a home there now.
It's
Okay.
all developed, yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
That's probably why our neighborhood's in that as well. Just it was vacant down there, and that's okay. It's close to the river, and we
Yeah.
can walk into town to light fireworks. But I do agree. We need to. I think all of us agree that there's not enough water in Gunlock to put out a fire right now, anyway. So
Okay, well, if those comments, I
I
guess we
would-
can look at the map and
Expand it to where any lot adjacent to the potential risk area is excluded, like all the homes on the west side of Country Lane. The wash is right behind the home.
right, yeah,
This map shows the home's okay.
we want to
I'd
take
pull it
those
out to
homes
the
off.
road. Yeah, any lot adjacent to, like Jim Ence's home shouldn't be okay. It's adjacent to the river, it's surrounded by trees.
yeah,
That's
Yeah,
a
that's
high fire risk. I think just follow your through there and you can tell the homes that are adjacent to the fire risk.
yeah.
Make sure that buffer goes at least one lot into
One
the
home in.
developed area, all through town.
That'll give you 150 feet all the way around.
Well, and that's why I said
agree.
even up there, Nicholas, the homes that are adjacent to the open space on the north, you can leave them in the fire restriction, but all the ones south of there closer to Pioneer, I don't
Behind
see a
there.
reason why they should be exempt or included in it.
okay. Yeah, we'll expand the map out so we can see those a little closer and draw that line.
Okay.
Little better.
We've got-
Christelle and I can work on that and then put it on the city website.
Kent Fry's new subdivision can't do it, but Lava Cove can.
Lava Cove was one that I wanted to put in the restricted area, I noticed,
Yeah,
yeah.
just kind of run through that and look at the lots along Riverfront Drive. Back up
Yeah.
to the river, those should be taken
They
out.
should be excluded.
Mhm.
We'll put in the restricted area.
We will bring it back to you next week.
For approval with a resolution or something.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks, chief.
Okay, thank you, council.
Robert down there, see? Everybody left. I about went to the next item. Is it working yet?
Does that work, Rock? Again, thank you for letting me speak here. When I got here and got the agenda and saw I wasn't on it, I thought, oh no, how did I mess this up? You know, what did I do wrong? And I'm sorry, but
This is what you want here, the council work meeting here.
the PDF, yeah. That's great. So this is in the packet I gave you as well, but this is you scroll down a little bit, take a second to load. This is the plan I think I showed last week. So the top half hasn't changed, but those condos down there show that was with the site plan last week, and there's townhomes on the east side of the property as well. We didn't indicate any fencing. We didn't have off-street parking along North Town or 400 East. So that's primarily what we were addressing this week. If you can scroll to the next slide, please. Yep, down at the bottom. So what we did here in an effort to create some separation from the townhomes to the north, we rearranged two of the townhomes. I'm sorry, two of the condo buildings. And we also moved. Okay, so these two condo buildings moved over here. We added a boat and RV parking separate, specific to the vacation rentals. There's still boat and RV parking to the north for primary residents of the townhomes. Um, along along Northtown Road here, we've added, I want to say it's 33 stalls. So that's going into our property, not just parking along the cities right away. With parallel parking along the south and then along the west. Added, it's another 33 or so parallel parking all along 400 East. You can go to the next slide, please, Brock. So we've added, showing some fencing here in the blue or purplish color. It's intended to be a solid block wall fencing. So that's on the east and the west sides, but then on the north and the south, I would propose a iron fencing. My whole point of kind of doing these rear loaded type of units was to, one, I think it's much more attractive for anyone driving by to see the front of the house and have that be what you see instead of seeing the back of the home. It also takes driveways and parking, so it's in the back and it's contained within the subdivision instead of backing onto a busier, Northtown Road or 400 East. The next slides, I think I've shown them before. You've seen them before. You have these in your packets, but there's elevations and renderings of what we're proposing. So this is one of the rear loaded townhomes. You can keep going, Brock. This is a front loaded townhome with the parking in the front. These are to show what the floor plans we're doing. But if we scroll down some more, there's a parking exhibit too that has a cross section.
While he's doing that, the building that you removed down in the vacation rentals, did it get absorbed up in the town?
So there were 4 buildings, last week, and what I showed you last week, there's still 4 buildings. So I didn't remove it, but I moved 2 of the buildings.
Okay.
So they're still down in the lower portion. There's still 80 units.
Okay.
You just shifted them around, I think.
Yeah, kind of rotated them. This is an elevation of the back side of the town. Sorry, the condos. This is why the email probably never got it to Christelle, because it's so big and a lot of pictures and.
Back up one, Brock.
Okay.
Is that the front elevation of the condos?
Yes.
So this would be the elevation that would be facing Northtown Road?
Correct.
And also facing whatever that interior street is?
Yeah.
Okay.
And maybe I don't have the slide I'm trying to go to, Brock, so.
That was 20.
That was it. Okay, sorry about that. I've got it in the packet, and it's just the aerial that looks like this, that shows the cross sections of Northtown Road and 400 East. They're big roads. They're both really big roads. Can you open up those pictures, Brock? There were 4 pictures in there, like photographs in that same folder, not in the attachment, but just photographs.
Yes.
So this is looking north on Northtown Road into Ivans, just to show
400 East, right?
I'm sorry, 400 East. You're right. Just to show how wide that road is, with cars parked on the curb. You can kind of see in the distance there's a car driving, further north away from me, and there's a car actually coming towards me as well. There's, easily able to drive on that road. Go to the next picture, Brock. This is looking south on the same road, Northtown, and at the corner of Northtown and 400 East. Again, just kind of showing the spacing there of, if we did want to add a parallel parking onto onto this road, I think that it could accommodate it without coming into the subdivision, but I'm happy to do either and have, essentially widen the road to provide parking. Here's a little bit of the pavement on 400 East, just showing parked cars on the side and how much room you still have. Once that road's improved all the way up, you'll have that whole, it's about 12 feet still for a single lane. And the very last one, Brock. Again, it's showing a car driving north and another one coming south with parking still, plenty of room in between. So anyway, I hope that's helpful just to kind of show you kind of what the street width is and what it would be like having if we did need to have parking on the side of the road. That's really what I wanted to show you. I wanted to address your concerns to me last week and show you that we think we can meet those concerns and still do a great development.
What's your phasing plan for the project?
Currently, we showed it in 6 phases, and we were going to develop along the east side of the subdivision. You go back one, Brock.
That's kind of a leading question. Like it's kind of what Mayor was talking about. Like, what it is when you move there. So if maybe the vacation rentals are there first,
and I certainly do that.
It might be a little easier for someone to digest.
Yeah.
I'm going to be sharing, not they invaded my space.
Yeah. I mean, we intended to always market that all along to let people know that this is what's coming, this is what's approved for. And that's why we tried to go in to get the whole thing approved this way at one time. So we could sell it up front to know that this is what's planned for, vacation rentals are planned here, townhomes are planned here. To answer your question, we plan to go along the east side here with the townhomes and then just kind of work our way in a counterclockwise and develop back here. But I could easily go the opposite direction and come this way and start with the townhomes first. Just a few points here, and I think I'll sit down. I can be long-winded, and I'm very, very grateful to be able to speak tonight. But not all vacation rentals are the same. What we're proposing is not the giant 30, 40, units that sleep that many people. These are small homes. Management is key to success, I believe, and that's why it's always been this essential part of what I've done vacation rental wise with the management that I have. I had 20 employees at Arcade today, and it makes such a difference having them there. It's not just a key fob you're handed and said, okay, clean up after yourself when you leave and keep the noise down. We're there enforcing it every single day, and we're there not 24/7, but we're there 7 days a week. And we have on-site presence there all the time. Providing enough parking, that's a big thing that we've done, and some of the comments we've gotten back was to increase it, and so we've done that. I really want to work with the city to develop something that will be really great, that everyone can be proud of and be happy with. I would prefer, I wonder if council would prefer if I would have come and asked for the whole thing to be approved as vacation rentals. And that's kind of a question to you. But I mean, would you rather see me apply that way instead of trying to say, okay, this is vacation rentals and this part isn't? And would you rather that I came and said, okay, I'm going to ask for the whole thing to be a vacation rentals?
Well, I don't, just based on what I heard tonight, I don't know that council would support the whole thing going vacation.
And that's not my desire to turn it all into vacation rentals.
And I like how you've brought the vacation rentals into one area. I think if we could work out the amenity, I still think you're going to have some problems with the amenity, with the shared amenity, the neighborhood and the vacation rentals. I just think that you're asking for long-term issues, mixing those two.
How would I thought, and I'm open to the suggestions on this, but I thought to have a master HOA that both communities that you're part of the master HOA.
The kicker is meeting the conditional use that, what's the bottom one? Quail Crossing has to have beefed up amenities as part of that project.
And that's what with the dashed line there, I'm showing that the.
But that's
amenities are-
also the amenity for the townhomes.
I'd like to have them be shared. I mean, I think that makes the most sense. I get what you're saying and say, hey, provide one for both of them, and that I've provided some amenities in the form of gazebo and play set and barbecue, area. I'd really like to be able to do some great amenities, and I think of Arcadia type amenities that could handle the size of a subdivision.
Yes, technically the townhomes don't require an amenity.
Only if it's bonus density, and
Right.
the townhome density is what?
10, 10,
It's
10.7.
So it's
So it's
some
there.
bonus.
It's have some there.
So I provided some amenity, whether it's a substantial amount. I agree. I understand that. That's where I'm trying to say it can be great and be one great amenity.
Now you do intend to, are the townhomes
For sale.
for sale? Just,
Robert, I agree with the mayor.
We would.
I think on the shared amenity, I mean, I think if I was a full-time resident there and on a Memorial Day, President's Day weekend, and 199 units of people trying to hit the pool, and you're a full-time resident thinking, hey, this is where I want to go, and then all the vacation rentals come in and they come there. I think that's, you have that conflict of like, hey, I'm here all the time.
Yeah.
So
I hear that. We see it at Arcadia every day where the people, Santa Clara residents want to come to Arcadia and want to come use that, knowing that we're full with vacation rentals, but still want to come into Arcadia and use the amenities, knowing that.
But you have that same issue in regular HOAs.
yeah.
You have the same problem. You have the owners who are there occupying them all the time. And then you have people who use it as a second home, and their kids show up every holiday weekend and they overrun your pool. It's the same thing.
yeah.
And again, the amenity, I think we spoke last time. By sharing the amenity, you're getting a much better amenity that you wouldn't. So there's kind of you wouldn't have it in a townhome.
Sure, a townhome, you might not even have a pool.
May not even have the amenity.
I mean, we didn't, the one I lived in when I was young, no pool. And I mean, I guess for me, and I don't know what on how you go down the ordinance of substantial, but 199 units, a lot of units. I mean, like on yours, I mean, Arcadia, you've got the current one, and I believe there's another amenity up in the phase 3, same as Paradise Village. There's the number of units, there's 2 amenities, there's pool and there's a splash pad. 2 different water features that can separate and bring some balance to.
I mean, one thought I've had is I say, okay, what if I say the amenity becomes completely for the townhome residents? And I say, okay, the condos, their amenity is Arcadia. Like, I mean, that becomes essentially a part of extension of Arcadia. Would that be an acceptable?
That's what you talked about initially, wasn't it?
I
This
forget
being
if I
a
brought it
phase
up.
4?
I might have, yeah.
How many units are in Arcadia
78.
at full build out?
Yeah, after this last phase, there'll be 78.
So that'd be doubling, right? There's
But
80.
well, with much smaller units, different. I mean, the Arcadia units are 5-bedroom units. These are
Small.
700 square feet up to
Yeah.
1,300 square feet. 4 to 10 people per unit. And with the nightly rentals, they're not used 100% of the time. That, I mean, full year-round residents, right? I mean, we're seeing occupancy of 30 to 40% at Arcadia, and so there's breaks like Memorial Weekend where it was busy, but many times of the year, the majority of the year is not occupied like that.
The condos are going to function a lot like a hotel.
I mean, they're going
Yeah.
to sleep people.
Well, but it's a 3-story structure. It looks like a hotel. It functions like a hotel, nightly rental. Parking's interior separated.
We're building a laundry facility and a maintenance building at Arcadia right now
Mhm.
to house everything, all of the needs, housekeeping wise, cleaning wise, linen wise. and we'd be able to meet the demands with this additional development.
Would the clubhouse on this one be the same as like Arcadia? That's where it'd be all the check-in and everything would be happening for the vacation rentals?
It's
Not there at the
there's no
clubhouse?
check-in when, when you come to Arcadia, everyone's sent a code. They can go right to their
Just
door.
go
and
right
get
to
their
the
stuff in.
thing. I made it
But
nice.
there'll be
Yeah.
staff, there'll be
Yeah.
staff individual at the clubhouse that can be there to help
Oh.
get them towels, make sure they should be there. That should be,
Okay.
we have wristbands on everyone that comes in. We monitor that. We've learned that over the years that when you don't, everyone just comes in and says, oh yeah, I'm staying in this home right here. But now we have a list every single day of who should be there and who shouldn't. And we monitor it. And that's, it kind of goes back to my comment on the management of things, of how we do it differently, how we can, so I was there late Memorial Day the other day. It was a busy day, but it did not feel crazy. It did not feel packed. It did not feel like what's going on here. This is, like I said, we had 20 employees that were there throughout the day, cleaning up, helping wipe things down, do towels, picking. There's a lot that goes into it, but that's a commitment that I'm willing to take to make sure it's done right.
So is the on-site management proposed to be in the clubhouse building on
Yes.
this property? Okay.
And it would close down and kick people out at the end of the day when they're supposed to, and security would come later that night as well. Make sure that people aren't sneaking in that shouldn't be there. My company builds the homes as well, so we're not going to install speakers on the outside of the homes or anything like that. Some other developments do that where they put an outdoor speaker, and that's a thing that people can connect to and play loud music later at night. But we won't do that. We restrict that in our CCNRs as well. We have that documented in our literature and the rentals. After at quiet hours, we enforce our rules.
Robert, another question. On that street that comes up off of North Town to the vacation rentals, will there be, a wall was going across on that north side? Is there a crash gate or is that an open road?
Do you want to go to the next slide down? I think it's just open.
Right here. That's spot.
It's open right now. If we need to put a crash bar or a gate or something like that, we certainly could. I don't think anyone's going to be parking here and driving up into here to use the pool or anything.
I just wondered, as a part of the discussion that had about being
Separate, yeah.
contained.
We certainly could add that. I don't know that it's needed, but we're open to that. I guess one last question for me is if there's anything that I can do to get you to feel comfortable about a project like this. I've listened to a lot of your comments tonight. I've written down notes, and I'm glad that a lot of thought and effort is going into, okay, what do we do for the future, plan for the future for vacation rentals? I think that's very wise. I think what I'm trying to do is different than what anyone else has ever come to you and proposed before. And maybe I'm wrong, but I haven't seen it done anywhere else the way that I've done it. I think that makes a difference.
Robert, is there any RV or boat storage in the townhomes?
Yes. Can you scroll up, Brock, to the very top?
Very top.
Very top right.
So that area up there, okay, all right. That's not a lot of spaces for many units.
We've left this detention basin here too, that we don't know if it's going to be needed or not. But the idea is that would become boat and RV parking if it's not needed, is a detention basin.
Because
We've got detention at the bottom, at the very south end as well.
what's your street width on the interior roads?
Go back a page, Brock. Main roads, 35 feet, top deck of curb.
35 feet of TBC to TBC, so 30 feet of asphalt.
Yep.
If you have, that's the same as my street. I'm just saying, you're gonna have people parking, you've got a lot of driveways though. You're not gonna get a lot of on-street parking without blocking.
If we need to paint something red or put up, a no parking street sign and.
Yeah, so you're gonna have people that are gonna have a trailer, they're gonna need a place to go. They can, park out on 400 East, but they'll need some place to
We
go.
do have that boat and RV parking down for the vacation rentals as well. And stuff.
I think the biggest issue I have is contractors.
Yeah.
It's the framer who lives out there and he's got a trailer. And the painter, all those guys have trailers. That's housing for that industry is what we're kind of looking for. And those guys have tool trailers and stuff that they hook up to their truck all the time, just a way to accommodate them.
And we've restricted that before in our CCNRs of no overnighting. I mean, I think the city ordinance is 48 hours of boat and RV parking on the streets, and we've restricted it been more than that.
I just like to see a place for those guys to be able to buy a house.
Oh, absolutely. Me too. Yeah. A lot of my employees that work for me, I think of them when I think of this development.
Yeah.
I'd love for you to come work it here. And I'm not trying to make a killing. I'm not trying to retire next week. I'm trying to provide good, attainable housing at a great quality that the school teachers and the contractors and those that work in the city and could afford and live here.
Well, if the city could put together some language. I looked at Matt. He didn't know that. I just wanted him to know that I looked at him when I said that.
I saw it.
Okay. All right. I'm going to go here because I've never gone here before with a developer. But you're not on the agenda, so I can go there. Would you be willing to work with us on providing some deed restricted housing? Almost, I don't want to say rent controlled, but something that would provide some attainable housing that could have some restrictions on it to where it could stay attainable housing inside the townhome project. Could that?
I'd like to. I really would. I don't know what you have in mind exactly with that, but I think we look at that.
It's a new critter. That's why I looked at Matt.
These
give us an opportunity.
the single family, I'm sorry, not single family, the front loaded units along here and here are the ones that I've always thought would be a better fit for attainable housing type of.
And they would have set price controls on them that you'd have to probably build into your cost model.
Yeah, and that's where the absorption of the amenities and pools and everything onto the vacation rental side helps with those costs that I don't now distribute to the townhomes.
But I'm even okay with that to help with some of the density bonus if he's willing to.
Sure, that's what I'm saying. If we can work something like that out, then we start checking boxes on city needs.
Exactly.
And I like that the units are down there together on the vacation rental stuff. If the amenity package is part of the townhome project and you work out something with the HOA that they can use it,
absolutely.
But it's inside that HOA and over time that use may change or something. I mean, there's some things like that that I think we can talk about. Denny just suggested taking everything south of that road and making it short-term rental.
I'd be happy with that.
South of the middle road.
Well, so the amenity package and everything south of the amenities was inside the short-term rental. I don't know that you'd need to go to that extent, but these other things start checking boxes on the city needs list. And I think the more boxes you check there, the more favorable the project can be viewed.
And I think I'd rather see the attainable housing versus
more
adding more vacation short-term
That's
rentals.
kind of my thoughts.
And I would agree. I like the townhome ratio in this. In fact, I was looking at that detention basin we're talking about. It would be great to see some more boat parking and trailer parking. And
Well, I'm not so sure you couldn't do both with the right surface, a permeable pavement or something in there. That could be a detention basin and
exactly.
a parking
that could be a
area.
storm brick system
And if the boats
underneath.
float once in a while, that's okay.
So here, I think David mentioned this earlier. Vacation rental properties sell for more. They're more desirable. There's a high demand for them in a low inventory right now. I feel like if I could get some more vacation rentals, and I don't want to ask it and sound greedy and sound like I'm trying to saturate the city with vacation rentals, but that absolutely helps with the offset the cost and provide more attainable housing. Because I know that I'm going to be able to sell my vacation rentals at a premium.
Well, and maybe take everything we've said, go back and look at your financial model and maybe tweak things a little bit and come back and talk to us.
Okay.
We're starting down the road of a development agreement as part of your zoning. That'll spell out all these other things that are part of that zone change. So it'll complicate the zoning a little bit.
Is that something the next month you're saying, you're thinking you'll,
I think as fast as you are ready to come back with something, Matt, it's going to take a while to put together a development agreement. We're going to work out
I'm on the agenda for
things we
next
talked about.
week with the planning commission.
Which I was gonna say, we
I'd like
hold
to
off,
do
hold
that.
off on that.
Well, I'd like to stay with it if I could, but I could, I mean, because I can make these changes to this plan, but I don't know that I'd have worked out with Matt, deed restriction, housing, you know what?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't-
What,
I think you need to work out some things before you jump on the planning commission. Or you're going to have a lot of that's where the public hearing is.
Okay.
And you need to have all the answers for the public at that public hearing. And I don't know if you're going to be ready by is that like on the
That's-
10th, right?
Next week, next
Yeah,
Thursday.
Okay.
that planning commission meeting is, at least after what you've done here, the city council gives the approval.
Right.
That planning commission meeting is the critical meeting because of the public hearing.
Right. Okay.
You need to have all your answers there.
So I could make the request to table that.
Yeah.
Planning commission, and then would I be able to get back on like in another 2 weeks or 4 weeks or? how-
In a month. It's just the second Thursday of each month. So you'd be looking at, well, I'm trying to think of what that second Thursday in July is,
Okay.
but
I think I'll shoot for that then.
the 8th of July, we could have that.
And you'd have time to be back on our work meeting agenda again if you want to come back and
I mean, I might.
We could maybe even have a joint meeting with the planning commission
Okay.
and bring everybody back to the work meeting setting.
Yeah, I don't know. The work meeting will be the 7th.
Yeah.
Will be the 7th, so
Oh,
it's
it's
the
the
day
night
before. Yeah,
Oh.
the way it works out.
Oh, well.
So it wouldn't, but if you wanted to have potentially the 30th of June is a Wednesday. It's the 5th Wednesday, so we wouldn't have a meeting. If you wanted to have a special meeting, potentially you could do that. And that still would give him a week, but
But I think, we can get you on TRC to discuss stuff. We can separate meetings with the city attorney. We can,
Okay. Matt, I know I bug you and email you all the time to get my plats recorded, and Chris knows that too. We got phase 3 recorded yesterday, so thank you.
Good.
But I'll reach out to you and talk to you about, what your thoughts are on this,
Okay.
how this might work. And,
Yeah.
So this is so helpful. I'm so happy that you gave me 5 minutes to talk here.
you're welcome.
I just really want to say I've really enjoyed the last 8 years working in developing in Santa Clara, nearly 200 homes. Anyway, I've got a great relationship with a lot of people here and a really good group of employees and staff and yourself, Rick, and everybody here on the council and Brock. So anyway, thank you for
The one email you sent me about the road right away.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, city's interested. We'll probably start working on some of those documents. You talked to you about that?
I've talked to Matt a little bit about that. Yeah.
We can get that request into the
Justin.
COG.
Okay.
Get that taken care of too.
Okay. Thank you. And I'll be back probably in about a month. We'll stay in touch. And is that special meeting? Is that a possibility or would I request that? Or is that something on the 30th?
you have to council if they wanted to.
I'll be out of town.
On the 30th?
The 30th is a 5th Wednesday, if you potentially wanted to do a meeting prior to.
I'll be around.
I'll be here too.
I'm here.
30th of June.
This is yours. This is Brock's. Yeah. That's yours, Brock.
Oh, that's ours. All right. Thank you.
No, thank you. Okay. Well, I'll
We'll
talk to you
discuss
tomorrow.
if council's up
Okay.
wanting to do that, so.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Robert.
Good night.
Okay, here we go.
Budget.
Speed talking begins. Deb, are you ready?
Mayor, can I say one thing before you move on?
I was so close.
Going to be quick. I quickly found a sample deed restriction from Park City and circulated it. So you all have it in your inbox. I'd be interested to have feedback from you on, we don't have to do it that way, but it maybe will give you some ideas.
Cool.
I don't know.
Just send that to Robert. too.
Flash drive?
I haven't, do you want me to email it to you? What's your email address?
Robert at Taylor Built Homes.
I don't know, that's what he brought up.
Okay.
I apologize for not replying to your email over the weekend. I was at Arcadia. I was having way too much fun.
You mentioned was it your mother-in-law or your mother was there?
All my kids and my grandkids, they never even got thrown out of the pool once.
I hope you saw how great of an experience it was and how,
Oh, it really was. Let me compliment you. Your team did a great job out there. And
and I think that's what it'll be in the future. And that's the level of
Yeah.
service and quality I want.
that's what I want to see maintained out there. But, okay, Deb,
Really?
Well,
fiscal year 2021-22 budget.
yeah, that's me. I will be quick. You'll get this back next week. Next week you will get Debbie, as I won't be here, but I'll be via Zoom, but you'll get Debbie. So real quickly, we'll jump, as we've talked, last fiscal year or this current fiscal year, we really, with the pandemic, we went bare bones. And so things turned out better than we anticipated, but we have increased our budget to account for some projects and equipment. So roughly say this is our last work meeting just to discuss if there's any changes, any things you guys want with the budget. The budget is increasing by roughly 35% from this current fiscal year. It's going up to just under 8.2 million. So
You found the money?
found some money.
That's the general fund.
That's the general fund. And we are using in the general fund, and the balance is roughly $880,000 of fund balance to balance the budget. That really is the projects and equipment that we put on the list of needs. And so in the general fund, roughly the general fund is roughly $879,000 of equipment needs. So that's really everything that is going into that fund balance is the equipment and projects that the staff at the budget retreat said, here's what we need. Here's kind of what we took out at the start of the pandemic with the budget. And now we're going to roll back into fiscal year 22. So a 35% increase, $880,000 of fund balance still leaves us a pretty healthy fund balance. We're still projecting for this current fiscal year to put about $300,000 to $400,000 hopefully into a capital projects fund. And even with that, we'll still be sitting, I want to say 21% fund balance, unrestricted. Also, no, I think I said that we can now go to 35% if we need to with the new bill. So that's the general fund. Couple of the big things in there is the Canyon View parking lot, BMX parking lot update that we discussed last week. Fire, we're doing a big one is $300,000 for an engine 33 replacement. That's one of the big one we also have in this current budget is, because we didn't know when we're going to get it, is the street sweeper, but potentially the street sweeper will be here in Salt Lake. So it's in Salt Lake. I thought I was going to get excited because
It's taken the long way.
yeah, it got there to get all the things put on, all the extras on it. But so it's better than our bucket truck. I know Gary told you about the bucket truck. Guy drove it, and I think it was in Albuquerque, New Mexico. The driver decided, I'm done. Took it to a truck center, dropped the keys off, and I'm done. Left it. So at least it made it to Salt Lake. But that's what happened on our bucket truck because it should have been here. And he's like called up and he's like, where's the truck? But
There's that employee that Wendell was referring to earlier, right there.
Negative star.
So
Didn't quite go all the way.
not so super.
So those are a couple of the big items. I know we have our annual chip slurry seal. This next year, potentially we have some bigger ones we've talked about. Maybe Santa Clara Drive, we'll have to get the chip seal and maybe coincide that with our redo of turn lanes and planters on that. So those are the big ones out of the general fund. Let you know, as we do each year, we transfer funds from the enterprise funds to the general fund for costs incurred by the general fund that otherwise, if the enterprise funds went down that road, we'd probably need employees to handle utility billing and maintenance and that. So I'll tell you the amounts being transferred to the general fund from the enterprise funds. From the water, it's 101,631, sewer 56,000, power 62,256, and from stormwater, 25,694. So that helps the cost that we incur in the general fund, benefits the enterprise. In the new budget, we have 2 new positions, a new firefighter and city planner, economic development coordinator. We are transferring from the enterprise funds, 2 enterprise funds, water and storm, water transferring 100,000 and storm 30,000 to help pay for their portion of the NBA bond. So 130,000 of that roughly $260,000 payment. Parks impact fees paying 30 and public safety 20,000. We don't have no plans to issue any new debt in enterprise funds or the general fund. Any questions so far?
I have one.
Okay.
On the revenue side for the general fund,
Yes.
the reimbursement from the court and fire and EMS from Ivan City,
Yes.
both of them are substantially higher than they've ever been. Is there a reason for that?
Go for
Use Mike.
it. Yeah, get them.
You got it. Hello?
We got to be able to hear you.
It's on.
Okay.
We just changed how we accounted for it. So if you look in previous years, it was, I would have to look, but so we're recognizing all revenue that we're paying. Let's see, that we're collecting from Ivan's, right? Ivan's what we pay. So, and if you look down in the public safety expenses, you'll see that the payments to them is higher. So it's just an accounting adjustment. It literally didn't, besides the increase of budget going from 55 to 54 and us 45 to 46, that increased us quite a bit, but it's just an accounting change.
Okay.
And I
Yeah, Lane and Debbie are doing different than what I had done it, the way they feel is easier to handle. Knowing that though, part of the big increase as well, though, is you have 2 budgets. The fire budget alone nearly almost doubled. It went from 652,000 to 1.19.
Yeah.
So, and as EMS went from 582 to 891. So big increases in there. Now, that roughly all capital equipment is almost everything. The reason for that increase, 300,000. They've got the engine replacement and a chase truck, radios, and an extrication cutter, which is, so you're talking almost $400,000. So, and we got to pay another percentage this year.
Is the CARES funding in there, the revenue?
For this current year, yes, there is CARES Act is accounted for in this current year. For next year with the ARP, the American Response Plan, no, we have not accounted for that yet.
So that'll be additional revenue beyond the budget.
Yes, so we will, just as we did with the CARES Act, we'll create a whole separate fund that can account for that revenue and the expenditures. So that will come as we get the total guidance on what we can do with it. If I remember right, we get one distribution, I think July, August, and then we don't get another one for like another year. We have till December of 23 to expend the funds. So,
And we finished spending the 184 that's listed on here, right?
yes.
Okay.
Yes, it has been allocated.
Okay.
So we have a few invoices still outstanding, and then the remaining will go to wages on public safety. So all allocated.
Is the federal infrastructure that they're talking about funding, is there any of that can be used here? I still, the MPO, to me, we need Santa Clara Drive and Pioneer Parkway as part of the MPO for the closures and the shutdowns in the gorge all the time. They're actually using our roads, and we ought to be able to.
Aren't they already in the MPO roads? Those 2? Santa Clara Drive's not? Let's look at that. Rachel, or Pioneer Parkway for sure. We know we've got additional improvements out there. We've got additional capacity improvements we're proposing on Santa Clara Drive with your signal changes, your lane changes. We might be able to get those eligible.
Okay, on that, general fund's is there. Oops. The one thing we are waiting for is back from the county on the exact property tax. Hopefully we'll have that next week, but next week probably might be too late to make that adjustment, but they didn't have that number, exact number. We have a projected number where we think we'll be, so. That's general fund. Enterprise funds. Water fund. Currently maintaining 53 miles of culinary water distribution. Their fiscal year 22 budget is just under 1.9 million, which is actually a decrease of 29% over this current fiscal year. One of the big decreases, we paid off a bond. So we're one bond debt free. We refunded that bond a few years ago and doubled up our last payment, paid it off a little bit early. So one of the big changes in that. So that's the water fund. There's some few expenses in there that for capital expenditures, depending on when they happen with the water line, booster pump. And so the sewer fund is at 740,000. It's a decrease of 5% over current fiscal year. The electric fund is at 5.469 million, which is a 1% increase. There's also in that budgeted roughly 900,000 to start design and work on the extension of the South Hills extension 69 kV line to the Green Valley sub. So start looking at that one to.
So have you got some money in there to buy some equipment in the Green Valley sub?
To buy equipment in there?
St. George City asked me today if we wanted to order the reclosures for the substation that we're connecting into
Out there.
at Sunbrook.
Okay,
I told her yes, because they probably got a super long lead time.
I'm sure they do.
And so I need to, she's supposed to be getting me a cost, and she was going to go back and look at the agreement with St. George City on that line.
Okay,
I'll forward what I find out to you.
okay. All right, I'll try to get off to Gary. No, currently, no, there was nothing budgeted for
I just know
equipment.
there's probably fairly long lead times, and
Yeah,
Jack had always intended, and I don't know if Gary knows, that when St. George did that improvement, that we would put in at least the poles down in the Sunbrook area at the same time they did, so that they're up.
yeah, so when the development comes, they already know.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what I only knew about that.
Just
is
need
trying to
some
get that.
funding for those types of things.
Okay. Okay, I will make sure with Gary that we count for that. I know that would be like impact fee eligible, as long as that's in our capital facilities plan, which is also being redone at the current time. So I'll make sure with Gary on that.
Is the generator in this budget? Our third?
It is in based on for the debt payment,
Okay.
because we already issued that bond, so the debt payment is there.
Okay.
So, and so then with stormwater, it's at 487,000, decrease of 6%. For all the enterprise fund, you see monthly decreases, relatively flat, nothing major, but that's the enterprise funds. They're relatively excited about this next year. It's getting some projects, some equipment purchased that staff has been put off. I think staff is excited about it to get some of those things done. And so appreciate council's support through this last year as we worked through the uncertainty of 2020, 2021, and then looking forward to this next year to allow us to expend some funds and to get caught up on a few things. So
Cool. Questions for Brock, council? And this will be before you next week.
Yes, we will have a public hearing next week and we'll have that and for adoption. So
Do we have to do anything with the funds that we're going to create in the new capital projects plan or fund? Do we have to formalize any approval or anything for that?
no,
Okay.
no, we'll just transfer those funds to the capital projects fund.
Okay.
And then they'll be allowed to be expensed as you see fit. I mean, we could use them if we wanted to in the next fiscal year for some of the projects. One of the good things I think would be is to kind of stock away, a little bit and build that fund up for, because we might see some bigger projects as well coming our way. So yeah, nothing. Yeah. If there is anything that if we do have to do formally, it might come in at the budget amendment.
Okay.
And which will be on the 23rd when we do the budget amendment. Then if there is anything, we'll make sure we do it then. So.
Okay, that it, Brock?
That is the quick and dirty, and I was quick relative to what we've had to do. I felt quick. So.
Okay, save the best for last. Water rate increase.
Received the notice the Washington County Water Conservancy District is increasing our fee by 10 cents per 1,000 gallons for purchasing their water. The current price was $134. They're raising it to $144. Last year, we spent about right around $91,000 in regional water. Using our average water consumption from the last year, a 10 cents increase will cost us about $15,000. We're proposing a rate increase of 10 cents per 1,000. It'd be a profit of $70,000 to the water department. And it could, the excess could be used for infrastructure improvements, new employee, aged equipment, rising costs, and necessary water line replacements. Looks like last year we had the same increase of 10 cents. And we did an increase also in July of last year.
Yeah, this is something we do every year now with the water district. They raise it 10 cents a year.
From what I can tell, it's been the past 3.
It's kind of their,
10 cents.
it's part of the Lake Powell pipeline funding.
They say that it's that, but they also use it for capital improvements.
Everybody's gonna do it, I imagine. Get it written up. Get it
Yeah,
on.
I did see St. George in my utility bill is that they're passing along the 10-cent increase as well. So.
Still too cheap. That's just my opinion. It's gotta be at least the price of milk in the desert, or the price of beer.
Yeah.
It's too cheap.
Yeah, I was telling my son the other day, we're getting gas. And he was asking how much. I said, well, it's about $4 a gallon. I said, it's a crazy thing. I'm $4 a gallon. And yet I pay at our low rate, 60, 70 cents per 1,000 gallons of water though. How cheap that really is. Relative to a gallon of gas is $4, but I can get 1,000 gallons of water for 70 cents.
Gas used to be cheap too.
Yeah. I'd like to see it cheap again. I remember when it was under $1. It was like 1998.
Filling my mini bike up in the 70s, 24 cents.
I think we're good passing it on.
Yep, I think so too. Okay, staff reports. You guys have anything else you want to add to this meeting tonight and extend it any longer than it absolutely has to go?
I just want to let you know we got 600 feet of asphalt added on to Pioneer Parkway today at Red Mountain, and it'll be striped Friday.
Awesome.
And the crosswalk signs, the LED signs also got put in at Chapel Street and Santa Clara Drive.
Oh, cool. Very cool. Thank you for that. I'll have to go drive it, try out that new turn lane.
Yeah, it looked really smooth.
Did it? You been through it?
The transition was really good.
Good work, Dustin. You didn't leave any bird baths, did you? You didn't leave any bird baths, did you? Okay, take the water truck up there. All righty. Do you have anything else?
No, I will, nothing more to say.
Okay, we're adjourned. What's the score, Chris?
51-75 halftime.
It's a blowout.
Who's getting